Chapter 511. Sure enough, there were many beautiful girls on the boat, but none of them was its owner. Moreover, these girls were dressed more boldly than their owners. They walked awkwardly with their butts swaying. Some of them even exposed their snow-white bellies. These girls were also more open than their owners. They often clung tightly to the men or even snuggled into their arms, using their lips to feed the men. Kieran felt disgusted when he saw this. Those ugly, handsome, old, and young men all had a look of enjoyment on their faces. Their palms were caressing the girls' bodies, making the girls giggle. Kieran was puzzled as he did not know what they were doing. However, he did not care about that at this time. Every time he got on a boat, he would search the entire boat. No one paid special attention to him as he scurried around the boat. It was also very convenient for him to search. The scenery on these boats was actually quite similar. He even saw a man and a woman lying on a big bed in the room of a boat. They had taken off their clothes and were fighting there. The woman was obviously at a disadvantage. She kept gasping for breath. No, ouch, it hurts. Please let me go. However, the man did not have the slightest intention of letting go. He held onto the woman tightly, his waist shaking, and used his stomach to slap the woman. He even said fiercely, "Little demoness, today I must kill you, you little demoness." Kieran originally thought that it was a little strange for them to take off their clothes and fight. He paused for a moment and took a few more glances. When he heard what the man said, he was immediately furious. It was already infuriating for a man to bully a weak woman, but he actually wanted to kill the other party. That was too embarrassing for men. In anger, he pounced on the man's back. He stretched out his sharp claws and scratched the man's back fiercely. That man was having a good time when he suddenly got scratched. He screamed and immediately went limp. With his back full of blood, he jumped up. Damn, what is this? Damn, where did this fierce cat come from? Kieran opened his eyes wide and warned sternly, "If you bully a woman again, I will bite you to death." God! Cat demon! The cat has become a demon. The man and woman in the room screamed. Kieran had no time to waste with them. After warning them, he flew out of the window. Chaos ensued on the ship. A moment later, everyone on the ship was looking for the talking cat. Kieran, on the other hand, had already jumped onto another flower boat and began its journey to find its master. Not long after, some people on the ship were also scratched by the ferocious cats, and chaos ensued. Kieran was very depressed. It had seen men bullying women on several of the brothel boats today, and they were in all kinds of positions. After it scratched the men, the women who were being bullied also screamed and looked for sticks to hit it. He simply didn't know what was good for him. These flower boats were connected to each other. In less than an hour, all the flower boats in the lake knew about the cat demon. They were all looking for the blue cat that had caused trouble. When the little Chilan boarded the boat again, it wasn't as smooth. Just like now, when it had just jumped onto a flower boat, it was immediately chased down by the turtle slave who was on guard against the demonic cat with a big stick. Those people chased it so fiercely that it had no choice but to jump into the water. Chapter 512. Kieran felt that it was too slow to swim in the water, so it decided to fly on the surface of the water, which attracted screams from the surrounding boats. Some people even started to shoot at it with arrows and threw stones at it. Kieran deeply felt that the people on the flower boats were too unfriendly. Why would its master board this kind of boat? Which boat was she on? What kind of danger was she in? Could it be that she was being bullied by a man like what it saw on the boat? It was flying gloomily and accidentally bumped into someone's arms. With a loud bang, it was knocked into the ground, causing it to feel dizzy. "Why are you running around? Where is your master?" A voice like ice and snow came from above its head. Kieran's body stiffened. This was the voice that it feared the most. All its fur stood up. It suddenly raised its head and looked into a pair of beautiful deep blue eyes. Han Shanyue. Han Shanyue was also floating on the water, his moonlight robe fluttering behind him. Why is he here? The reason why his master ran away was to escape from him. Kieran's eyes widened. Its mouth opened so wide that a duck egg could be stuffed in. Han Shanyue frowned. "Speak. Where is your master?" "On the flower boat." Kieran's brain was still in a state of paralysis, so it subconsciously answered. She actually boarded the flower boat. This girl was simply unrestrained when she did things. Was there any place that she did not dare to go? Which one? These 3 words came out of his mouth coldly. I don't know. I am also looking. I have looked for many boats. Kieran was inexplicably pressured by his body and stuttered. Is the telepathy between you and her fake? Why don't you ask her? Han Shanyue's body seemed to be even colder. I can't sense her. I don't know who cut it off. I can't sense her. Could she have died? Oh. The little Qilin was anxious and scared, and its eyes were filled with tears. Shut up. If she is dead, do you think you can still live? Han Shanyue was almost defeated by this stupid Kieran. Did it think that the blood contract was fake? Was the function of the blood contract just to fool it? The little Qilin finally remembered the matter of the blood contract. That's right, it was still alive and well. This proved that its master was also alive. No, it couldn't sense her now. Did someone break the blood contract between it and its master? Its eyes were too transparent, and almost all of its questions were written in them. Han Shanyue immediately understood and reassured it. Stupid. This blood contract wasn't something that anyone could undo. Also, even if there is such an expert, both you and Ning Xuema have to be present. The little Qilin was relieved, but it was still a little puzzled. It looked at Han Shanyue in astonishment. You are quite familiar with the blood contract. Chapter 513. Han Shanyue glanced at Kieran unkindly, and gave it a one-word evaluation. Stupid. Kieran was not convinced by his scolding and wanted to refute, but Han Shanyue had already thrown it into the lake. Wash your claws. Dirty. Its claws were still stained with the blood of the people it had scratched and almost touched Han Shanyue's body. Kieran finally remembered that its claws were still dirty and hurriedly washed them in the water. When it looked up, it saw Han Shanyue's sleeves fluttering as he walked towards the shore. Hey, wait for me. I will go with you to find my master. Kieran shouted from behind. I will look for her, you go wash your claws properly. Han Shanyue did not even turn his head. He and Kieran were chatting on the surface of the water, and had already attracted the attention of countless people around them. Countless heads popped out from the boats and looked over. Han Shanyue ignored their gazes and flicked his finger. A bright white firework shot up into the sky and exploded in the dark blue sky, lighting up half of the sky. After a while, 8 people seemed to have emerged from the ground and appeared in front of Han Shanyue, who had already reached the shore. They bowed to him. Master, what are your orders? Han Shanyue ordered bluntly. Quickly find out which boat had a banquet 3 hours ago and report to me in 15 minutes. Yes. The 8 people replied in unison and scattered in all directions. Kieran hurriedly washed its claws and finally returned to the shore. It saw Han Shanyue standing there with his eyes looking into the distance and his fingers forming a seal as if he was calculating something. Mr. Han, do you have her whereabouts? Han Shanyue ignored it. Mr. Han, do you think my master will be bullied by the men like those women on the boats? Kieran felt that it had been traumatized. Han Shanyue. He looked at it unkindly and did not understand what it was saying. What did you see? I saw men bullying women, and they took off their clothes and pressed them down. They used their stomachs to hit the women and the women screamed miserably. Kieran tried its best to describe it. Han Shanyue staggered for a moment. He looked at Kieran strangely for a moment. His gaze was unfathomable. Kieran was frightened by his gaze and shrank back. Why are you looking at me like that? Han Shanyue did not speak but sighed and stretched out his hand. A white light flew out from his fingertips and covered Kieran. His movements were too fast, and the little Qilin was caught off guard. It was instantly enveloped by his white light. At first, it still wanted to struggle, but after struggling for a while it was unable to break free. Its expression gradually became confused. A moment later the white light dissipated. The little Qilin shook its fur and looked at Han Shanyue blankly. Little apple, tell me, what did you see on those boats? The little Qilin blinked its eyes. I saw a lot of men, a lot of women, and also a lot of things to eat and play. That's all? That's it? Is there anything else? Little Qilin's eyes widened. However, it seemed to have forgotten something. Han Shanyue's face finally showed some satisfaction. He nodded slightly and ignored it and continued to calculate. Kieran looked at his fingers. His fingers were so beautiful. as if they were carved out of jade. There were no flaws at all. Master, you really know how to tell fortunes? Kiran looked at him as if he was a fraud. In its eyes, fortune tellers were all frauds. Chapter 5:14. Han Shanyue did not even bother to look at it. Is my master really a loner? Is she really that unlucky? Han Shanyue's voice was calm. My fortune has never been wrong. Although he had his own selfish reasons for saying that she was a loner, he was not wrong. That girl was indeed a loner, and not just a loner but also, she is really a loner. Kiran lowered its head. It thought that Han Shanyue was just fooling it. Then she really can't marry in the future? Han Shanyue finally looked at it as if he was looking at an idiot. Didn't I say that I would marry her? Aren't you afraid that she will jinx you? My life is harder than hers. I am not afraid of jinx. So you are marrying her because of this? Just to accept her? Not to let her be alone for the rest of her life. You can say that. So you are so kind. Kiran was touched and could not help but sigh. Master, are there many loners in this world? If there are many of them, and they are all women, how many concubines do you have to marry? Han Shanyue was speechless. He could not help but feel speechless. It was as if he was picking up trash. Was he such a busybody? He had traveled the world for so many years, and he had seen many loners. But the only one that attracted his attention was Ning Shuama. He did not want to chat with this silly and naive Kiran anymore. So he coldly said, not every piece of trash I like to accept. Kiran opened its eyes wide and said angrily, my master is an elite, no an elite, not a piece of trash. Oh right, you said that your life is hard, are you also a loner? Or the most powerful loner? It seemed to have suddenly realized something. No wonder my master did not want to marry you. She must be afraid that you will jinx her to death. My master is really wise. Han Shanyue was speechless. He had the urge to kick this little Qilin into the lake. Could that girl really escape? No one had ever escaped from his grasp. Master. The 8 subordinates came back one after another. They all bowed to him and told him what they had heard. 2 hours ago, there was indeed an official Guqin recital. All of the high-ranking Guqin players in Daliang City participated, including the young mistress of the Yen clan. It was said that the young mistress had a Guqin player named Xue Xue with her, whose talents shocked everyone. An hour ago there was a thick fog on the lake. Some people on the small boat saw the magnificent ship sailing into the thick fog. Later on the fog dispersed, but no one saw the ship again. Because the lake was very large and wide, and there were many bends and forks, the ships could not always see each other. Therefore, the disappearance of the ship did not attract much attention. However, the 8 guards had searched every corner of the lake, but they couldn't find any trace of the ship. It was as if the ship had disappeared into thin air. Kiran was shocked. Did the ship sail into the space-time hole? Han Shanyue glanced at it, and Kiran immediately said, this is what my master told me. She said that in some mysterious places where she came from, ships and planes would often disappear for no reason. Some people guessed that they might have entered the space-time hole. It is another space-time hole. In response to Kiran's worries, Han Shanyue only commented, she is dreaming, and you are not awake either. Chapter 5:15. Han Shanyue's gaze turned to the 8 guards. Before the ship disappeared, was there anything strange on the lake? One of the guards said, it was a bit strange. The people who saw the ship said they didn't see anything strange, but they seemed to be a bit confused. They all said that after the ship disappeared, they had a headache and seemed to have forgotten something. Han Shanyue clenched his fingers. The memory erasing technique. He thought that he was the only one who knew how to use it. He didn't expect there to be a second person. The image of the red-clothed evildoer, Xue Ilan, flashed across his mind. His eyes were cold. Before this, did they see a man in red? The other guard thought for a while and said, there was indeed a person who said that when the zither music was beautiful on the big ship, a man in red came on a small boat and played an even more beautiful zither music. However, the person who said this was a half-drunk man, and the others thought that he was talking nonsense. No one believed him. It was him. He didn't expect that guy to chase him all the way here. Did he and Shuama meet on purpose, or was it just a coincidence? The Guqin souls of the Guqin players on the ship should be enough for that bastard to repair his Guqin. And Ning Shuama, If she fell into his hands, how would he treat her? Would it be? After instructing the 8 guards, his figure flashed and floated towards the direction where the ship had disappeared. He had to find an abnormal aura in that area of the water to deduce what kind of technique Shui Yilan had used to transport the ship away, as well as the possible destination of the ship. Kiran jumped up when it heard the 2 words red-clothed. It followed Han Shanhua closely. Master fell into the hands of that red-clothed pervert again. God, that pervert always had bad intentions towards her. He will kill her. Oh no, oh no. That red-clothed pervert who bites the hand that feeds him is after my master. Will he fry my master first and then kill her? As soon as the last few words came out of its mouth, its 4 paws suddenly staggered and fell into the lake with a splash. Han Shanhua's cold voice sounded, "Little apple, if I hear you speak rudely again, I will fry you first and then fry you." Kiran emerged from the water and wiped the water droplets off his face with his claws. Since when did it speak rudely and use random words? Wasn't it supposed to be fried first and then killed? Instead, he killed them first before frying them? It seemed to be more reliable to kill before frying. Only after killing can you fry it, right? However, it seemed to have overheard its master saying something about frying first and then killing. Not knowing the word, he went to ask Tom. Tom's explanation was that he would fry them after killing them. It raised its head and saw that Han Shanhua had already drifted away. It hurriedly followed him. When it caught up to Han Shanhua, he was standing on the surface of the water, deep in thought. "How is it? What do you think? Have you found the whereabouts of that ship? Where did you go?" Kiran asked again. It was thick-skinned and was not afraid of sticking its warm face to the cold, but of this big ice cube Han Shanhua ignored it. His lips curled up coldly. Fog demon conveyance technique. That guy was really willing to spend money. He actually used this method to take the ship away. He was already injured, and then he used this technique which consumed a lot of psychokinesis to move the ship, and then he used the Guqin spirit to repair the strings. Under such continuous consumption, he was probably an arrow at the end of its flight. Perhaps this time if it caught him again, it would be able to get rid of him once and for all. "Master, can you find him?" "How?" Kiran asked. Chapter 5:16. We have to hurry. Give me a general direction and I'll use my nose to find her. My nose is very sensitive. Master can't stay in his hands for too long, or else she will be at a disadvantage. Kiran said hurriedly. "Shut up, don't be noisy." Han Shanhua shouted to stop its nagging. His heart was in a mess because of its noise. He had dealt with many demons in his life, so he was used to being calm. No matter what happened, he could plan in an orderly manner to deal a fatal blow to the enemy. Only this time his heart was in a mess. The worst thing to do at this moment was to be in a mess. Although the little girl was a troublemaker, she was smart enough to hold on for a while. He would rush to save her. Kiran felt that it was about to smoke from its anxiety. Looking at Han Shanhua's calm and steady manner, it was also angry. This person was really heartless to its little master, right? Master was in the bad guy's hands, but he was not worried at all. But why was its master facing so many disasters? She was walking on the edge of danger every day, without a moment of peace. It accidentally muttered this sentence out loud. Han Shanhua finally looked at it and said lightly, "She has a blade in her life, so naturally she will face disasters at every step. Is there any way to solve it?" Kiran felt that it might be good to listen to the trickster's words. Master should change her luck. She needs to find a strong backing. Han Shanhua said. "Strong backing?" Kiran blinked its big eyes and suddenly had an epiphany. "I know. Master should go to the Sun Moon sect to become a disciple. Now the Sun Moon sect is the strongest. All the sects are afraid of it. If she can become a disciple of the Sun Moon sect, maybe no one will dare to find trouble with her. She can also live a peaceful life." Han Shanhua was speechless. His eyes were unreadable. "Little apple, do you think I'm not strong enough?" If that girl stayed by his side, all these would not have happened. But she wanted to escape. Kiran looked at him seriously. "You are indeed strong, but Master is not willing to be anyone's concubine." She said it was an insult to herself. If she enters the Sun Moon sect, she will at most be a disciple. No one will make her a concubine. Han Shanhua raised his eyebrows and pursed his lips. You don't want to be a concubine? Are you willing to be my disciple? However, he had set a rule that he would no longer accept female disciples. Was he going to break the rules for her again? He seemed to have broken too many rules for her. Kiran, on the other hand, seemed to have suddenly found a broad path for his master. He immediately beamed with joy. The venerable emperor of the Sun-Moon sect thinks highly of my master. Perhaps he will personally take her as his disciple. It was said that the ancestor was extremely protective of his disciples and would not allow anyone to bully them. As long as little mistress can become his disciple, everyone will give face to the ancestor and won't dare to make trouble for her. Han Shangyue glanced at it lightly. The ancestor thinks highly of her? Why don't I know about it? You're not omnipotent, so of course you don't know. Thinking back to when my master was almost executed in a public square, it was the ancestor who personally stepped in and saved her. I heard that the ancestor doesn't meddle in other people's business, but for the first time, he stood up for my master. It's clear that he values my master very much. Han Shangyue was speechless. Indeed, he did not like to meddle in the affairs of the mortal world. That day he did not know why, but he seemed to have a sudden impulse. Chapter 517. Also, Dizun has no regard for mortals, but when he was in the palace, he took pity on my little mistress. He was afraid that she would be frozen by his cold air, so he let her out for the first time. Kiran continued to list. This was what he had heard from the servants when he was in the Marquis's mansion. Han Shanyue's eyes flashed slightly, but he still did not speak. Moreover, the ancestor never gossiped about people, but when he left Vast Sky Empire, he solemnly told the old emperor about my master. The little Qilin gave the third example. Han Shanyue raised his hand and rubbed between his eyebrows. This third time was indeed intentional. He just wanted to take advantage of that girl's rotten peach blossom. Out of the three examples, only the last one was slightly more reliable. Tell me, don't you think the ancestor values my family's little master? The little Qilin confidently concluded. Han Shanyue smiled slightly. After hearing what you said, it seems to be the case. Why don't you encourage your little mistress to go to the Sun-Moon sect and become a disciple? Dizun can indeed protect her to grow up safely. Let's see if he will accept your mistress. I heard that he only accepts a disciple once every 80 years. It has only been 40 years, so it's not time for him to accept a disciple. Also, he doesn't accept female disciples. Rules are set by people, so naturally they can be changed. My little mistress is so smart. Dizun will definitely accept her. Kiran was full of confidence. Then, I will wait and see. Han Shanyue picked it up from the water and pointed at it. Kiran involuntarily returned to its original form. Han Shanyue jumped on its back and said, "Everything can wait until we save your mistress. Go to the chaotic river." Kiran's eyes lit up. It tore open its four hooves and began to run. After running for a few feet, it asked embarrassedly, "Where is the Wonton River?" Han Shanyue. His voice was cold. "Looks like she really wants to raise you into a cat. A Qilin beast actually doesn't know the distribution of rivers in this continent." Kiran was afraid of him and did not dare to answer at this time. Han Shanyue pointed out the path for it and threw it a map. He said coldly, "Within 3 days, memorize this map completely. I will check your homework." Kiran. No, it hated reading books and it hated memorizing books even more. Master, where are you?" When Ning Xuema woke up, she found herself in a dilapidated temple. The sky outside was still dark. Looking out of the broken window, he could only see a few scattered stars. It was very dark in the dilapidated temple. If Ning Xuema's psychokinesis hadn't reached a certain level and could see things in the dark, she might not have been able to see anything at this moment. He didn't know which deity was worshipped in the dilapidated temple. Most of the golden paint on the statue had been peeled off. Under the statue was a small table, and below it were a few praying mats. She was lying on a string of praying mats. The praying mats were rough, and although she was wrapped in a red robe, she still felt flustered. In particular, the wound on his back was burning with pain. When Yifeng took her as a hostage, he looked fierce, but in fact, he knew when to stop. At that time, the sword had only pierced through her skin and did not injure her vitals. If it was handled properly, it wouldn't even need to be bandaged. But now it hurt so much. It must have been cut by the hurricane when he carried her away. Shuailan didn't know what medicine he gave her, but her head was still a little dizzy. Although she was awake, her vision was blurry. Chapter 5:18. There seemed to be some movement behind her. Ning Xuema turned around and secretly clenched her fists. Shuailan was sitting on a praying mat not far behind her. His eyes were slightly closed. It was a posture of meditation, as if he was meditating. In the night, his face was a little pale. His originally rosy lips were also a little dry and dull. He was injured. Ning Xuema was overjoyed and quietly stood up. Not bad, her acupuncture points were unsealed. She could move freely. She slightly activated the psychokinesis in her body, but she couldn't feel it. She looked at Shuailan unkindly. Needless to say, this bastard sealed her psychokinesis again. Damn it. When she didn't have any psychokinesis, everyone called her a good-for-nothing. Now that she had cultivated a little, whoever caught her would seal it. Her psychokinesis had no place to be used. In this world, martial prowess was indeed the way of the king. One day, she would become the king of this world. She would definitely seal up all these people who had dragged her around and let them have a taste of being bullied and humiliated by others. She stood up and didn't do anything else. She was like a cat hibernating in the dark, silently observing her opponent's reaction. Shuailan didn't move. This bastard was usually as alert as a snake. Now that he was so quiet, could it be that he was seriously injured? Or was he testing her again? Ning Xuema tried to walk towards the door. She had already opened the door of the rundown temple. The night wind blew in and caused Shuailan's clothes to flutter. Shuailan still didn't move. This bastard was seriously injured. Ning Xuema's eyes flashed with a murderous intent. This bastard had been following her like a ghost, trying to kill her from time to time. If he didn't die, she would never have a day of peace. She might as well take this rare opportunity to get rid of him. She turned back. She walked casually, as if she was just at the door to take a look at the scenery. All the weapons on her had been taken away by Shuailan. Her psychokinesis was also sealed. She was bare-handed, so it was impossible for her to kill him. Shuailan must be thinking the same thing. That was why, after sealing her psychokinesis, he sat there and calmly meditated. He didn't guard against her anymore. In the dark, Ning Xuema's lips slightly hooked up. She slowly approached Shuailan, without the slightest murderous intent. Shuailan didn't guard against her and didn't react to her approach. Just as she was about to reach him, Ning Xuema tapped the ground with the tip of her foot, and her body shot out. A pair of shabby chopsticks appeared in her palm, which she then stabbed towards Shuailan's temple. Although her psychokinesis was sealed, she still had her inner strength. Although her inner strength could not be used as a hidden weapon like the legendary flying leaves and picking flowers, it was still quite profound. When she attacked, it was as fast as lightning. Although it was just two broken chopsticks, its power was not inferior to a sharp sword. Agile and elegant, natural and smooth, this move was perfect. As long as Shuailan was stabbed by her chopsticks, he would become a bloody gourd. Seeing that the chopsticks were about to pierce his head, her wrist suddenly tightened and a strand of black hair wrapped around her arm. Her wrist hurt and her hand lost strength, causing the chopsticks to fall to the ground. Then her waist tightened and the world spun around her. By the time she reacted, she was already lying on the ground with Shuailan's entire body pressing down on her. This time he hit the wound on her back. Her face turned pale and she couldn't help but gasp. Chapter 5:19. However, she paused midair and stared wide-eyed at Shuailan's handsome face that was suddenly closing in on her. She was so nervous that her body stiffened. Shuailan's eyes shone brightly in the night. He didn't look injured at all. You pretended to be injured on purpose? Ning Xuema glared at him. She cursed this bastard in her heart for being crazy. If he wanted to kill her now, it would be easier than killing an ant. Why did he pretend to be injured to test her? He wanted to see if she would do anything to him? He wanted to see if she couldn't bear to do that to him? Was he crazy? How could she not bear to do that to him? She was simply too heartless. Was there even a need to test her? Shuailan's breath was right next to her face. It was warm and carried a faint fragrance, making all the hairs on Ning Shuama's body stand up. She struggled a bit, wanting to send him flying with a kick. However, her body was firmly restrained by him and she couldn't move at all. She could only watch as his handsome face came closer and closer. It was so close that it was already touching her earlobe. Little Shuama, so you hate me so much that you want to kill me whenever you have the chance. There was a hint of grievance in his voice. Ning Shuama looked at him with a "Are you crazy?" look. She couldn't be bothered to reply to him. How can you bear to do that to me when I'm so nice to you? Shui Yilan turned on his resentful wife mode. It was a success. Ning Shuama had goosebumps all over her body. You're nice to me? Ning Shuama was furious. I released you from the coffin. Not only are you not grateful, you've even tried to harm me time and time again. I almost lost my life in your hands a few times. Is this being nice to me? What will happen if you don't treat me well? Little Shuama, we have to be refined people. Don't be so rude. Shui Yilan stroked her lips with his finger. Isn't your little life still fine in your body? Look, you're still alive and kicking even now. Yelling at me and plotting against me. I don't even want to bicker with you. You should know that those who have offended me usually end up being skinned alive. But I can't bring myself to do it to you. Isn't this good for you? Ning Shuamo really wanted to laugh at him. Was not skinning and breaking the bones of his savior a kind person? This was simply demonic logic. She did not want to pay any more attention to him. He simply closed his eyes. Suddenly, his eyelashes heated up. His voice was low and teasing. Little Shuama, your expression. Are you inviting me to bed you? Ning Shuama's body stiffened. She quickly opened her eyes to look at him and replied, Go to hell. This bastard looked refined, but he actually said such words. Even if I die, I will die under the peony flower. Shui Yilan's eyes gradually deepened. At this moment, their bodies were tightly pressed against each other. Ning Shuama could even feel the heat of his body, as well as the obvious male changes in his body. Her heart beat rapidly. In a panic, she couldn't help but grasp at the life-saving straw. Shui Yilan, you can't be so perverted. I'm only 13 years old. Your body is already 18 years old. It can withstand the nourishment of a man's rain and dew. Shui Yilan's palm had already begun to caress her back. Moreover, I also like delicate bodies. Even if you're really 13 years old, you're still very much to my liking. Don't worry, I'll be very gentle with you. You'll taste the most extreme ecstasy. His hand that was wandering around her back was like a poisonous snake. Ning Shuama's nervous fingers also stiffened. She suddenly had an epiphany and shouted, Black Wave Zither. Oh! Chapter 520. As expected, Shui Yilan's body stiffened. He squinted his eyes. What's wrong with the Black Wave Zither? The person who gave you the Black Wave Zither was a woman, right? Your sweetheart? You must love her very much. You can't do anything to betray her. Ning Shuama guessed randomly. She felt that Shui Yilan's attitude towards the Black Wave Zither was unusual. When he hugged it, it was as if he was hugging his lover. Shui Yilan pressed on her body, but he didn't do anything else. He looked down at her. His green eyes were dark, as if he was looking at someone else through her. Ning Shuama held her breath slightly. She tried her best to be gentle. She didn't want to provoke him and make him go wild again. After a while he sighed softly. A look of approval flashed across his eyes. Little Shuama, what you said might be true. The Black Wave Zither was hers. But I forgot about her. Ning Shuama. What was going on? Why was she so confused when she heard this? Shui Yilan's fingers touched her lips again. I can't remember her appearance, I can't remember anything about her. But I feel that I should love her very much. She sealed me in a coffin. I should hate her to death. Isn't this like what you humans call love and hate? He lost his memory about that woman, so he couldn't love and hate her? Was that abnormal? You can try to find her. Maybe you'll remember everything when you find her. Ning Shuama guided him patiently. I don't know how to find her. I can't even remember her identity. That's okay. Since she could seal you, her psychokinesis must be very high. She must be a famous person on this continent. You can try to ask around. Or you can wander around with this zither. If you say it's hers, She might come to find you when she hears the sound of the zither. Shuilan tilted his head and looked at her. You're thinking for me? Of course, I hope that the two of you can resolve all your grudges. Look, when she sealed you, she clearly left you a way out. Clearly, she isn't completely heartless towards you. Perhaps you did something wrong to her, which made her hate you so much that she sealed you. You see, even if you've forgotten her, she's still there in your subconscious. You two are a pair of lovers. As long as you find her, you might be able to resolve all the misunderstandings and live happily ever after with her. Ning Shuima tried her best to draw out a beautiful blueprint for him. She tried her best to find something for him to do so that he would not always find trouble with her, as if he had nothing better to do. What you said makes sense. Shuilan nodded. It seemed that he agreed with her. Ning Shuima was secretly delighted. She continued, of course what I said makes sense. Let me go first. You know that girls are very narrow-minded when it comes to love. They can't tolerate even a grain of sand. The most intolerable thing was for a lover to be two-timing. If you really love her and want to get her back, you should keep your chastity for her. Girls are very particular about this. Shuilan's expression was a little strange. He looked at her and suddenly said something shocking. Why do I feel like you're her? Ning Shuima secretly rolled her eyes. How could that be? I'm not her. The person who sealed you must be a genius and I'm so weak. Ning Shuima tried to reason with him. Damn it, if she was that woman, she would have sealed this bastard 800 times already. Why would she need to talk so much nonsense with him? But I have a special feeling for you. I always feel that you're the person I should be closest to. Shuilan's fingers stroked her long eyelashes again. Chapter 521. It's an illusion. It's definitely an illusion. Ning Shuima said seriously. I think you've been locked in a coffin for thousands of years, so your brain has gone haywire. You have the mentality of a chick towards the person who let you out. Shuilan frowned. What do you mean by haywire? Haywire means that your brain is a bit slow. You don't have to think too much about this. You have to catch the main point of my words. The main point of my words is the mentality of a chick. Shuilan smiled faintly. You mean that I'm close to you because I see you as my mother? His tone was faintly unfriendly. Ning Shuima immediately said seriously, it's just a metaphor, just a metaphor. You're at least thousands of years old and I'm only 13. You definitely don't see me as your mother. Damn it, if I had a son like you, I'd definitely smash you against the wall. This metaphor is quite fresh. Shuilan's eyes were deep. Little Shuima, you're quite talkative today. You're still so considerate towards me. Do you like me? I like you my ass. Ning Shuima looked at him with watery eyes. I just hope that lovers can find their way together. You and her should be a match made in heaven. Lovers can find their way together? Haha, what a good lovers can find their way together. Little Shuima, you're really a lovely person. I find that I like you even more. He lowered his head and kissed her on the nose. Why don't you be my co-wife in the future? Ning Shuima was speechless. This bastard's brain circuits are definitely not parallel to a normal person's. Seeing that he was about to kiss her again, Ning Shuima desperately shouted, You're being disloyal to her by flirting with me. She definitely won't forgive you if she finds out. She's so cruel to me. Does she still need me to be loyal to her? Shuilan's voice was cold. Without saying anything else, he lowered his head and kissed her on the lips. The strong fragrance of the flowers was intoxicating. Ning Shuima's mind went blank, and she subconsciously closed her mouth. The tip of his tongue seemed to have some kind of magical power. It was able to easily pry open her teeth and enter her mouth. Ning Shuima was very anxious. She steeled her heart and wanted to bite him again. Suddenly, she felt a cold sensation on her throat. Something cold slid down her esophagus and into her stomach. Her body stiffened, and before she could react, Shuilan suddenly rolled off her body. Her face instantly turned pale, and her chest heaved up and down as she gasped for breath. His injuries had finally relapsed. He couldn't suppress it anymore. As soon as Ning Shuima regained her freedom, she almost didn't think before jumping up and slapping him with her palm. Heart-linking voodoo. Shuilan quickly spat out these 3 words and successfully stopped Ning Shuima's fatal strike. What? Her palm stopped at the side of his face. I fed you the heart-linking voodoo. Shuilan laughed as he gasped for breath. He laughed quite happily. If you kill me, you won't be able to live either. Ning Xuema clenched her fists. She was originally a poison expert. Not only did she study all kinds of poisons, she was also not a layman when it came to poison-related voodoo. She knew that there was indeed a heart-linking voodoo in this world. It could forcefully link the fates of two people who didn't want to do the same thing. The reason why it was forceful was because the person who planted the voodoo and the person who planted the voodoo were not bound together for good or ill. It was because the person who planted the voodoo couldn't hurt the person who planted the voodoo. Otherwise, if the voodoo hurt the other person a little, it would be 10 times worse. Simply put, if Ning Xuema slapped Shuilan now, she would have to be prepared for 10 slaps. Chapter 522. To put it simply, heart-linking voodoo. Its function was, if Ning Xuema slapped Shuilan once, she would have to be prepared to receive 10 slaps. On the other hand, when Shuilan slapped Ning Xuema, even if he slapped her 10 times, he would at most feel like he was slapped once. Because refining this type of voodoo was very complicated, and the materials needed were very rare and difficult to collect, there were not many people who could refine this type of voodoo. She did not expect Shuilan to have one. And it was on her body. Was this bastard trying to make her his puppet? Ning Xuema took a deep breath and did not bother to argue with Shuilan anymore. She ran out of the temple to vomit. The voodoo was wrapped in an ice shell. She had just swallowed it, so she might be able to vomit it out. A moment later, Ning Xuema walked back with a pale face without saying a word. Shuilan was panting even harder, but he smiled at her. How is it? Did you vomit it out? Ning Xuema didn't say anything and kicked him. Shuilan was kicked to the ground. Ning Xuema felt a sudden pain in her waist, and she took a few steps back. She almost fell down as well. Shuilan laughed while lying on the ground. Good kick. Little Xuema, do you want to kick this deity's lower back acupoint? Ning Xuema gritted her teeth. Shuilan did not lie to her. He really did put the heart-linking voodoo in her. She kicked him, and the same part of her body felt like it had been kicked 10 times. It was burning with pain. The wound on her back waist was still there. If she was kicked again, she might faint from the pain. Fortunately, she did not use all her inner strength when she kicked him. Otherwise, he would vomit blood, and she would lose 3 liters of blood. She looked at Shuilan, who was lying on the ground laughing. It was her first time seeing him laugh so happily. Why did this bastard suddenly become so weak? I didn't see anyone hurt him. No matter how he got injured, this was a chance for her. Ning Xuema narrowed her eyes. She grabbed his collar with one hand and lifted him up. She sneered, scoundrel. You will pay the price for what you did today. She casually threw him to the ground. Shuilan rolled on the ground. Ning Xuema also fell and sat on the ground. Little Xuema, it seems like you are not used to the heart-linking voodoo effect yet. Poor child. Shuilan looked at her sitting on the ground with a bright smile. Smile on his face. Ning Xuema wished she could use her fist to punch his handsome face, but after thinking about it, she restrained herself. She stood up and smiled at him. It's funny, isn't it? It will be even funnier later. She thought for a while and pressed him down. Then she searched his sleeves. She had to take this rare opportunity to find the things that this bastard had taken from her. She clearly remembered that Shuilan had put her belongings in his sleeves. She was afraid that this guy would do something bad, so she pressed him down and searched his sleeves. Shuilan's face was like a peach blossom. He sighed under her body. Little Xuema, aren't you a bit too enthusiastic? I think it's better for a man to take the initiative. Ning Xuema. Shut up. Her hand inevitably touched Shuilan's arm. His arm was cold, but it felt good to the touch. He looked like an elegant gentleman, but she did not expect his arm to be so strong. Strong and strong. No wonder this bastard was so perverted. He hid his strength under his robe. Shuilan obediently laid there, letting her touch him all over his body. Chapter 523. Shuilan stared at her back view. His gaze was deep and unfathomable. Ning Xuema felt goosebumps from his stare. She searched his sleeves for a long time but did not find anything. Bastard, where are my things? Ning Xuema shouted. Shuilan's handsome face was slightly red, and his eyes seemed to be rippling with water. Try touching more places. Ning Xuema. If it were not for the mind-linking venomous insect, she would have beaten him up. She didn't hold back and touched both of his sleeves. Then she reached out to the front of his shirt. In this era, people usually kept their things in these two places, inside the sleeves and the chest. Just as her hand reached into Shui Yilan's chest, his eyes became even more watery. Little Shuama, are you trying to attack my chest? Ning Shuama actually did not want to touch his chest. When she heard his voice, her hand trembled and the back of her hand bumped into a small protrusion on his chest. Although she was a virgin, she was a doctor after all. She was very clear about the structure of men. Naturally, she knew what she bumped into. She could not help but stiffen. Sure enough, I'm attacking your chest. Shui Yilan's voice was faint with a hint of intoxicating hoarseness. Ning Shuema. She can't touch it anymore. She pulled her hand out and said fiercely, Shui Yilan, if you know what's good for you, you'd better hand over my things. What if I don't know what's good for me? Shui Yilan was curious. If you don't know what's good for you, I'll strip you naked and throw you out of the temple. I'll let everyone admire your naked body. Shui Yilan immediately straightened his body and obediently cooperated with her. That's not bad. Please strip me naked and admire me. Ning Shuama. She was speechless when she met such a thick-skinned non-human who could not be hit. At the moment he really couldn't think of any solution. Shui Yilan looked at her with a resigned expression. Everyone says that you have to pay back your debt quickly. I just took off your clothes, and now it's your turn to take off mine. Come, take it off. Ning Shuema paused for a moment. Then she suddenly sneered and reached out to take off his red robe. Shui Yilan was shocked and pursed his lips. This girl really dared to take off his clothes. He didn't have much strength now, and he also wanted to see where Ning Shuema's bottom line was. He might as well let her do as she wished. In a short moment, he had already been stripped down to his underwear. He reclined there, his black hair draped over his shoulders, winding under his jade-like skin. There was actually a kind of flirtatious beauty. Ning Shuema felt that this scene was vaguely familiar, as if she had seen it in a manga master's drawing. It was a standard picture of a little bottom lying lazily in bed. Evil. Ning Shuema shifted her gaze away from his body and began to search the robes he had taken off. After a while, she gave up and threw the robe aside. Then she glared at Shui Yilan hatefully. That guy was now only left with a pair of extremely thin underwear, and she couldn't see any pockets on his underwear. He couldn't possibly hide all her things in his underwear, right? Shui Yilan's anus tightened when she stared at him. He subconsciously tightened his legs, and his face was full of chastity. You won't really take off my clothes, right? Ning Shuema. Forget it. The ancient people here usually didn't wear underwear. If she really took off his underwear, she was afraid that he would really be naked. Although she had seen men naked before, that was because she had to save someone. Now that he obviously couldn't hide anything in his underwear, why would she take it off? She wasn't that wretched. She glanced at Shui Yilan. It was rare to see this bastard nervous. Chapter 524. She had a mischievous thought and simply tore all the clothes he took off into a pile of rags. Didn't this bastard like to be refined and well-dressed? She wanted him to run around naked in his underwear. She wanted him to embarrass himself once. Shui Yilan looked at her with his eyes wide open. After a while he laughed. Little Shuema, do you think that my body is quite good and want to keep looking? Actually, even if you don't destroy my clothes, you can still look at me whenever you want. Ning Shuema tilted her head and looked at him. She blinked her big eyes. Really? Your body is really not bad. I don't think it's interesting for me to look at it myself. I need more people to look at it. Damn, it was a pity that there were no cameras in this era. If there were, she could take pictures of him from different angles and post them on Weibo, WeChat, and forums to expose this bastard. However, even if she couldn't take pictures now, she could still call more people to look at his embarrassing appearance and vent her anger. After she finished speaking, she clapped her hands and stood up. Then she walked out in large strides. Little Shuema, actually I really want to fulfill your wish. Unfortunately, there is no one within a few hundred miles of here. Even if you want to find someone, you won't be able to find him. Shui Yilan seemed to be a little regretful. Ning Shuema's footsteps paused. She snorted and rushed out of the door. Was she thinking of escaping by herself? Shui Yilan's eyes flashed and his lips slightly hooked up. If that girl really had this idea, she would regret it. Only Shuailan was left in the ruined temple. It was quiet for a while. Shuailan slowly propped himself up from the ground and sat down to meditate again. He had to seize every second to recover. In the battle with Han Shangyue in the palace, he was slightly injured. Even one of the strings of the Black Wave zither was damaged. He treasured his zither and did not hesitate to use a forbidden technique to absorb the zither spirits of various zither to repair the Black Wave zither. However, at the last moment it was destroyed by Han Shangyue. Not only did it break the zither string, it also added to his injuries. He had never expected to meet such a powerful opponent in the human world, and he knew that he could not meet force with force in his condition. He could only choose to temporarily stay away. He was obsessed with fixing his Black Wave zither. He had heard that Daliang City was a famous zither city, and thought that there would be plenty of zither players in the city. That was why he had come here. Coincidentally, there was an annual Guqin recital in Daliang City. Almost all of Songhai City's most renowned Guqin players were on that ship. He felt that this was an excellent opportunity, so he found an opportunity to approach the ship. However, he discovered Ning Shuama's aura on the ship. He didn't know what he was thinking about this little girl, so he set up a trap at the back of the ship in advance. He had planned all of this very carefully, and he had taken every step with great care. She was in the light while he was in the dark. Ning Shuama, who was as cunning as a little fox, really fell into his trap. She had become the object in his net and his prisoner. Shuailan was very happy to be able to catch her again. When he saw her jumping around in anger, he was even happier. He was so happy that he almost forgot about his injuries. If he only wanted to take the zither spirits, he could do it at the lake. He had plenty of ways to make those people listen to him. However, with Ning Shuama there were many more variables. To be safe, he used his telekinesis to use the fog demon transporting technique and moved the ship to the chaotic river thousands of miles away. Everything went smoothly after that. Everything went according to his plan. Chapter 525. Those people had no choice but to agree to Shuailan's conditions. The only thing that was out of his expectations was that Ning Shuama was actually engaged to someone else, and it was a heavenly marriage. There was a special characteristic of a heavenly marriage. Once the person engaged to the heavenly marriage had an extramarital affair, they would be struck by lightning. If she was not willing, then the person who was struck by lightning would be the one who tried to force himself on her. If she was willing, then both of them would be struck. Shuailan had only heard of heavenly marriages, but he had never seen one before, so he did not believe it. In order to verify this, he purposely tried to get close to Ning Shuama. Although he was careful, he was still struck by lightning. This made his injuries even worse. Fortunately, it was not as if he did not gain anything. He successfully absorbed the Guqin souls of more than 20 people, and finally repaired the zither string. Originally, he only needed to take the last group of people's Guqin souls, and his zither would be completely repaired. However, he did not expect that the cold and ruthless Ning Shuama would take the risk for the last group of people, and become their hostage. He did not want to see Ning Shuama die in the hands of others, so he could only agree to Yifeng's conditions and let the group of people go. At this moment, Shuailan's internal injury was already very serious. When he was running with Ning Shuama, he was a bit powerless. He was unable to set up a barrier to protect her from the hurricane, causing her injuries to worsen. Midway, his sixth sense came into play again, and he sensed that his nemesis Han Shangyue was about to arrive. He was definitely not Han Shanyue's match now, so he decided to go all out, and used the last of his psychokinesis to open the gate of ghost and went in. When he reached the ruined temple, he was already at the end of his rope, and could only stop to rest. Because Shuailan was exhausted, sealing Ning Shuama's acupuncture points was a little difficult, and the effect was not as strong. This caused her to wake up midway. Although he was exhausted, it was more than enough to deal with Ning Shuama, who had just woken up. Finally, at the last moment, he made her eat his goo worm. He had truly restrained her. However, this little girl was obviously not restrained, and she should have other tricks up her sleeve. After a while, Ning Shuama came back. She dashed into the dilapidated temple like a gust of wind. Before Shuailan could react, she threw a black and sticky object into his arms. Shui Lan lowered his head and looked at the thing in his arms. It looked like an oversized cage, and there were many nests on the cage. It was a huge beehive. And it was the hive of the world's most poisonous and powerful black peak. In that instant he understood what Ning Xuema wanted to do. His expression changed, and he raised his hand to throw the beehive away. Unexpectedly, there was some sticky honey on the beehive. The beehive stuck to his pants and he couldn't pull it off. Almost at the same time he heard a buzzing sound. When he looked up he saw a black cloud rushing towards him. Black Peak. And it was a whole nest of black peaks. This girl actually attacked Black Peak's nest to take revenge on him. There were thousands of black peaks in this swarm, and they were rushing towards him from all directions. Being stung by one black peak would be painful, and if he was stung by such a big nest of black peaks, Shui Lan didn't dare to imagine what would happen to him. He rolled on the ground and threw the troublesome beehive away. These black peaks would recognize their own nests. Some of the black peaks ran towards their own nests, and some of the black peaks were very vengeful. They treated Shui Lan, who was stained with honey, as the main culprit. Chapter 526. The wasps buzzed as they chased after Shui Lan, as if they couldn't vent their anger if they didn't stab him until his head was full of bumps. Ning Xuema crossed her arms and stood not far away, looking at Shui Lan's figure running around like a ghost. In this life-and-death situation, although Shui Lan's injuries were serious, he was still able to unleash his body's greatest potential. His movements were even smoother than a leopard cat. How could he still be as weak as before? Sure enough, a person's potential was like water in a sponge. There would still be some if squeezed. Seeing him run away in such a sorry state, Ning Xuema's heart was finally able to vent a bit of her resentment. This bastard still underestimated her. She couldn't kill him herself because of the heart-linking voodoo. But couldn't she call for help? These black wasps were her best helpers. They could stab him to death 70 to 80 times. Ning Xuema, my heart-linking voodoo is different from others. Not only can you not hurt me, if I get hurt, you will also feel the pain. If I get stung, you won't be able to escape. Shui Lan rushed towards Ning Xuema. He obviously wanted her to help him intercept these black wasps. Ning Xuema's figure flashed and dodged like a ghost. She didn't believe his nonsense. She would get hurt if she stung him? She had never heard of heart-linking voodoo having such an ability. She didn't want to be tricked by him. She stood coldly on the high ground, looking at him getting more and more miserable. You don't believe me? Shui Lan's movement technique paused for a moment. A black peak crashed into his body and fiercely pierced his arm. Ning Xuema's left arm suddenly hurt. As if she was stung by a wasp, she almost fell from the beam. Her left arm hurt like a knife, causing her forehead to be covered with sweat. It was the pain of being stung by a wasp. This bastard was actually telling the truth. This time, Ning Xuema didn't dare to take the risk anymore. She jumped and ran towards the beehive, then slowly whistled. The whistle was not a tune, but it had its own style. Strangely enough, the black peaks that were chasing after Shui Lan paused in midair. Then they all flew towards Ning Xuema and entered the beehive on the ground. A moment later, all the black peaks returned to the beehive, and the ruined temple regained its tranquility. Shui Lan fell to the ground. His face was pale, but his deep eyes shone in the dark night. You actually know how to control bees. Ning Xuema sneered and did not answer his question. This was a special skill that she had cultivated in her previous life. She could use her whistle to attract bees and butterflies, which was comparable to Xiao Longnu of the ancient tomb sect. When she went out just now, she found this beehive under a big tree. First, she tried to control the beehive with the whistle she used in her previous life. After she succeeded, she plucked this huge beehive to sting him. Originally, she thought that these bees would be able to take away half of Shui Lan's life, but she didn't expect the heart-linking voodoo to have such a perverted ability. Ning Xuema was so angry that her teeth were itching. She looked at Shui Lan, who was sitting there, and her heart was filled with regret. It seemed that she couldn't take this opportunity to get rid of him. She could make the antidote for the heart-linking voodoo herself, but the ingredients needed were troublesome. She couldn't gather them in such a short time. She could only wait until she was free. The bee venom on her arm was still hurting, and all the medicine on her body had been taken away by Shui Lan. She couldn't apply any medicine even if she wanted to. Luckily, it was only one area. She endured for 6 hours, and the bee venom was automatically removed. Catch. Shuilan flipped his hand, and a small green bottle appeared in his palm. He threw it to her. Chapter 527. Ning Shuima took the bottle and looked at it. Her eyebrows moved. This bottle was hers. The medicine in the bottle could not only cure the bee venom, but it could also cure sword wounds. She subconsciously wanted to apply the medicine to her arm, but when she pulled up her sleeves, she remembered that she was not poisoned. It was that bastard who was stung. If he was in pain, then she would not have a good time either. She unwillingly threw the bottle to him. Apply it to the stung area. Shuilan caught the bottle. In the dark night, his eyes sparkled. Little Shuima, so you can't bear to part with me? Can't bear to part with you, my ass. If it wasn't for the fact that his injuries hurt her, she wouldn't have cared about him at all. Ning Shuima did not want to care about him anymore. She turned around and walked out of the temple. Since she could not kill him, she could only take this opportunity to escape. Otherwise, once this bastard recovered, she would not have a good time. Seeing her figure disappear in front of the temple, Shuilan suddenly smiled. He suddenly realized that he liked her even more, and wanted to keep her by his side even more. He sat up straight and closed his eyes. He meditated and silently counted in his heart, 1, 2, 3. He did not count quickly. It was like a second hand. When he counted to 60, a black shadow flashed by the door. Person flew back. With a scream, she slammed into his chest. Fortunately, Shuilan was already prepared. The moment she flew back, he immediately made a move. With a twist of his wrist, he removed most of the force from her body. Even so, her strength still caused his body to sway, and he almost fell down. Ning Shuima simply wanted to curse. After she left the temple, she did not see any movement from Shuilan. She was secretly glad that she had escaped from the wolf's claws. She was also afraid that a long delay would cause trouble, so she immediately ran away. But unexpectedly, after running for more than a mile, his heart suddenly skipped a beat, and he actually flew back involuntarily. She didn't run very fast, but the speed at which she flew back was astonishing. She desperately tried to adjust her body in the air, but to no avail. It flew back like a bird returning to its nest. The moment she threw herself into that person's embrace, she heard him chuckle softly. Then she felt her ribs go numb, and her entire body went limp as she fell into the other person's embrace. Little Shuima, I know you've missed me, but I can't enjoy such a passionate hug. Shuilan placed her on his lap and stroked her lips with his fingers. Ning Shuima. Her vision turned black, and she felt extremely sleepy. She knew something was wrong, so she forced her eyelids open and glared at him. Bastard, you poisoned me. Shuilan smiled brightly. Little Shuima, I just accidentally pricked you with a needle, and this needle is yours. Ning Shuima felt dizzy. She finally understood what kind of poison she had been poisoned with. It was indeed a poison needle that she had developed herself. Its effect was similar to an anesthetic needle. It did not cause much harm to the human body, but it could make people sleep for half a day. It was originally a weapon for her to protect herself, but she did not expect that it would become his accomplice. A strong sense of sleepiness came over her, and her vision turned black. She did not know anything. Shuilan saw that she had finally settled down in his arms, and the corners of his lips curled up slightly. He lowered his head and kissed her lips gently. Little girl, my heart-linking venomous insect has a unique function that I haven't told you about. The person who has been poisoned cannot be more than 2 li away from the person who poisoned you. Once you exceed this range, you have to obediently fly back. Chapter 528. Shuilan placed Ning Shuima on the futon next to him. Then he took out a few pills and put them in his mouth. One day, if he had one day, he would be able to recover most of his martial arts and do what he wanted to do. Kirin did not dare to look at Han Shanyue's face anymore. Although Master Han had been very calm and did things in an orderly manner, Kirin could sense that Kirin was very sensitive. However, the little Qilin was keenly aware that his mood had always been suppressed, just like the calm before the storm. It couldn't help but be alarmed, and didn't dare to say a single word of nonsense along the way. They had reached the chaotic river and even found the sunken ship. Kieran even fished up a few strands of human hair, a broken jade pendant, and a few broken bones. Kieran still could not feel any trace of Ning Shuima. Fortunately, other than the occasional panic and pain, there were no other symptoms. If Kieran was still alive, it meant that Ning Shuima was also alive. At least, she did not meet with any mishap. Kieran was a little relieved. Logically speaking, since they had already found this place with Kieran's nose, he should be able to find Ning Shuima's scent and track her down. But no, he could not smell her scent at all. The surrounding air seemed to have been cleansed by someone. All traces of her scent had been erased. How could this be? The ship had clearly sunk here. Master could not have left early. After Han Shangyue asked Kieran a few questions, he said softly, "The art of disappearing trace." He did not expect Shui Lan to be so careful. Could it be that he had already guessed that Han Shangyue was here? Although it was the first time Kieran heard of this art, he could guess from the name. He cursed, "That pervert." He was even more worried about his master. He clenched his claws tightly. He did not give up and walked around again. When he came back, he saw a scene that made him stunned. Han Shanyue's sleeves fluttered as he stood on the surface of the river. No one knew what kind of spell he was making, but a chilly wind blew around him. Within the chilly wind, there were faint silhouettes. Soul Congregation spell. Generally speaking, to use this kind of technique, one would need to use some magic tools and also do some preparation work. The little Qilin had personally seen the big brother who went into the stone essence cave with it use this kind of technique. The procedures were very complicated, and at that time it was very tired just watching from the side. Who would have thought that the new heavenly master, Mr. Han Shanyue, would be able to use it so easily? Furthermore, this one move had attracted over 30 of them. It was too awesome. The souls floated around Han Shanyue. More than 20 of them had blank faces, as if they had lost their main souls. They half knelt at Han Shanyue's feet and only knew how to kowtow. They didn't even know how to answer his question. Fortunately, there were still 8 or 9 of them who seemed to be conscious. They bowed and opened their mouths, as if they were answering Han Shanyue's question. Kieran was curious and was about to walk over to take a look when Han Shanyue sent a message. "Stop. You have too much yang energy, it will kill them." Kieran could only wait. After a while, Han Shanyue waved his sleeves and flicked his finger. In the air, a cloud-covered heavenly path appeared, leading straight into the depths of the river. The souls stepped onto the cloud-covered path one by one. Only a female soul seemed reluctant to leave. She surrounded Han Shanyue and kept whining. It seemed like she wanted to stay by his side and be a servant. Chapter 529. The sorcerers in this world did raise little ghosts. Kieran could tell that Master Han was an expert in this field, and he probably lacked little ghosts that could run errands and fight. Kieran thought that he would keep her. But who would have thought that after the little ghost said a few words to Han Shanyue, Han Shanyue seemed to have lost his patience. He flicked his finger and a white wind flashed by. The female little ghost screamed and her soul was torn into pieces, dissipating in the air in an instant. Kieran was speechless. This master was too heartless. Even if he did not keep the girl by his side, there was no need to destroy her soul, right? It thought that even if he did not keep her, he would still release her soul. This master seemed to be more violent today. "Master, you are the guardian of the vast sky kingdom. You should be merciful and fair. You should be afraid of hurting the lives of ants when you sweep the floor. You should protect the lanterns with moths and not hurt the living. That girl only wanted to stay by your side to be a little ghost, that's all. If you scatter her soul like this, won't you lose your godhood?" The little Qilin felt that this heavenly master's behavior was a little bit ruining its 3 views. Han Shanyue glanced at it. Didn't you just get the title of Master of Heaven? Did he mean that he was not used to this new identity? Kieran nodded. Yes, you just got the title, so you have to follow the rules of the Master of Heaven. Who told you that this is the rule of the Master of Heaven? Han Shanyue's tone was still indifferent. I always follow my heart. I am the Master of Heaven. I am the rule. These words were simply too arrogant. Kieran was not convinced and said, I heard that this rule was set by the Overlord. Do you dare to go against his rules? Are you more powerful than the Overlord? Han Shanhua's eyes flashed and suddenly flicked his finger. A white light flashed by and the little Qilin cried out as it somersaulted and fell straight into the water. You didn't improve much, but your ability to talk nonsense has improved. Han Shanhua's eyes were cold as he looked at it coldly. The little Qilin touched the newly popped green bump on its forehead and jumped out of the water. It was still somewhat puzzled. How did he know that what he said just now was nonsense? Maybe he knew who set the rules of the Master of Heaven? Or maybe he knew the Overlord very well and knew that he would not care about other people's business. Don't think about it. Hurry up and ask them where they went. Han Shanhua's tone was a bit impatient. Huh? Ask who? How? Kirin did not respond. Han Shanhua looked at it as if it was an idiot. Master of the Master of Heaven, is this Qilin fake? Master of Heaven. It had actually forgotten about its innate ability. It coughed. I forgot. It didn't dare to dawdle and immediately used its beast language to summon the monsters in the river to inquire about the whereabouts of Ning Xuema and Qin Wentian. Kirin. Han Shanhua stood there and looked at Kirin Shanhua. This Kirin beast was really going to be raised into a cat. There were a lot of monsters in the river. Although they hadn't gained wisdom, they could still understand the little Qilin's words. They also had an instinctive fear of it, so they didn't hide anything from the little Qilin's questions. Some of the monsters saw the direction that Shuilan and Ning Xuema escaped. Some of them had chased after Yan Zuan. Chapter 530. After all, these monsters did not have intelligence, and their thoughts were still a mess. Moreover, they had an even worse problem, which was that they were colorblind. They did not know who was in red or blue. Therefore, when they answered the little Qilin's questions, they were always vague and ambiguous, giving specious answers. These two groups of people were also confused. Kirin had a headache listening to them, and could only reflect their meaning to Han Shanhua. Han Shanhua looked at Kirin with a pained expression. Do you think Shuilan would take the water route? It must be the one that flew in the air. The little Qilin touched the bruise on its forehead with a guilty conscience. It felt that its IQ was a little low recently, but when Han Shanhua looked at it as if it was an idiot, it felt a little hurt. I was too anxious about Master's whereabouts, so I didn't think it through. He did not dare to say any more nonsense, and immediately asked the monsters which direction they flew in. The monsters looked at each other again, and then two monsters spoke. These two monsters saw two groups of people. One group was Shuilan, and the other group was Yi Qinghuan. Not only were they colorblind, they were also face-blind. In their eyes, they could not differentiate between men and women. Fortunately, these two groups of people were going in the same direction, so Kirin did not feel too troubled, and told Han Shanhua the details. Han Shanhua left without saying anything, and Kirin hurriedly followed. As long as he knew the general direction, he would be able to catch up to Shuilan. After all, the evading trace consumed a lot of telekinesis, and with Shuilan's current condition, he would not be able to use this method for long, and he would definitely reveal his scent later. Han Shanhua's prediction was correct, and after one man and one beast chased in that direction for about 70 to 80 miles, the scent of Ning Xuema and Shuilan finally appeared in the air. Kirin was happy and worried at the same time. He was happy that he could finally smell his master's scent again. He was worried because his master's scent was entangled with Shuilan's scent. It seemed that his master could not escape from Shuilan's grasp. He did not know if Shuilan, that perverted bastard, had tortured her yet? He was worried, and he said it out loud. Will that bastard fry my master first and then kill her? Before he could finish his sentence, Han Shanhua's head was slapped again. Han Shanhua's voice was like ice. Little apple, if I hear you say that word again, I will cook you first and then fry you. The little Qilin's head was burning, and it didn't dare to speak any more nonsense. It concentrated on sniffing for its master's aura. After searching for about 2 to 3 li, the little Qilin suddenly stopped. Master and Shuilan Shue's scent were disappeared. It circled around the area for a while before finally confirming that it couldn't find it. Master, did he use the evading trace again? Kirin was puzzled. Han Shanhua did not answer. He made a hand seal as if he was sensing something. After a while, he said in a deep voice, he opened the ghost path. Kieran was stunned. Of course he knew about the ghost path. The ghost path was not an ordinary path in the human world, but a path hidden in the secondary space. This path could only be opened by someone with great telekinesis. For example, in the Kieran clan, only elders had the ability to open it. The ghost path was different from ordinary paths. Ordinary paths had a direction and a beginning and an end. However, the ghost path was directionless and followed the ghost path's will. Chapter 531. Everyone's ghost path was different. Unless they thought of the same destination, they would not meet in the ghost path. Which direction did Shuailan want to go after activating the ghost path? Kieran had no clue at all. He could not help but look at Han Shangyue. Han Shanyue's face was gloomy. After so many years, this was the first time he met such a cunning and troublesome opponent. He flipped his wrist, and a faint golden sound transmission talisman appeared in his palm. Thousands of miles away, on Buddha Lotus Mountain where the Sun-Moon sect was located, the head general manager, who was in charge of all the Sun-Moon sect's affairs, was arranging the day's affairs in his study. One of the white jade walls suddenly lit up with a luster. The head general manager's eyes widened in shock. After being stunned for a moment, he hurriedly knelt in front of the wall and said solemnly, "Ancestor." After the ancestor left the mountain, he would not easily contact them, because there was almost nothing in this world that he could not solve. Even if he contacted them, he would ask about the sect's affairs and so on. When he contacted them, he would use the sound transmission talisman and not the heavenly sound wall. The heavenly sound wall would only be activated by the ancestor when something major happened. And the order from the heavenly sound wall was the highest order. It required all the Sun-Moon sect's disciples to move out in large numbers. There was no room for objection. They had to succeed, they could not fail. The head general manager's heart was thumping wildly. He thought that something major had happened, but he did not expect the faint golden characters on the heavenly sound wall to light up one by one. All disciples within 1,000 miles of the chaotic river. Search for a red-clothed man and a woman with him at all costs. Send news to me within 6 hours. Although the head general manager was bewildered, he did not dare to delay. He immediately replied, "Yes, ancestor." He suddenly stood up and hurriedly went to arrange things. The Sun-Moon sect had more than 10,000 disciples. Who knew how many spies they had arranged in various countries? It could be said that they were intertwined and complicated. In this way, no matter where on this continent there was a change, the Sun-Moon sect would immediately know and make the corresponding arrangements. There was nothing in this world that the Sun-Moon sect did not know. Their intelligence network was richer and more accurate than any other country's. The Sun-Moon sect would not easily interfere with the affairs of these countries. Usually, they would just organize the information. They were detached from the outside world. However, once he interfered, he would use thunderous methods that no one could defy. As for the spies arranged in the various countries, they were all clever and sly people who could take charge of their own affairs. Normally, these people would not be easily touched, as long as they reported to him on time. Now that the ancestor had issued this order, everyone had to move out. A moment later, all the Sun-Moon sect scouts on the entire continent received the same order, to search for the red-robed man within 500 kilometers of the chaotic river. Although everyone received the same orders, the areas they were assigned to search were different. They covered the entire area within 1,000 miles of the chaotic river. These people immediately moved out and began a carpet search around the primal chaos river. As long as the red-clothed man was in the area drawn by the ancestor, even if he hid in a mouse hole, these people could still find him. Kieran naturally did not know that Han Shanyue had just lightly written a few lines of words on the light golden talisman, and had already given an order that could shake the entire world. After he finished writing, he put away the golden talisman. Chapter 532. Kieran stared at him. Subconsciously, it thought that this person was omnipotent and would have a good way to find its master. It was waiting for him to do something else, such as opening the gate of ghost or something. Unexpectedly, after he put away the talisman, he turned around and went ashore. He sat down on a platform and closed his eyes to meditate. At this time he still had the mood to meditate. Kieran's scales almost stood up. It rushed in front of him. "You're not looking for my master?" Han Shangyue ignored it and continued meditating. She's your concubine. I heard that a concubine is also a kind of wife. Your wife was taken away by another man, aren't you worried? Kiran was furious. She's not. Han Shangyue finally spoke. His voice was cold. She ran away from the marriage. Kiran choked. She did run. Run away from the marriage. But you don't want her anymore? He looked up and asked again. Han Shangyue finally opened his eyes. His voice was cold. Why must I want a girl who ran away before the wedding? Since she ran away, there's no room for her to regret. Then this marriage is not valid? Kiran didn't know what to feel. It was as if it was angry for its master, but also as if it was relieved for its master. After all, it knew that Ning Xuema was very unwilling to be married to this person as a concubine. Han Shangyue closed his eyes again and didn't speak. Then you really don't want to look for my master? Kiran didn't give up. Han Shangyue only replied with one word. Wait. He had already made arrangements. Those people had already started a carpet search. No matter which side had the news, he would be the first to know. Shuilan opened the gate of ghost at this place. So this place was the center and radiated in all directions. Therefore, he stayed here to ensure that he would rush over as soon as he got the news. He was now chasing blindly without any direction. Not only would it waste his telekinesis, but it might also be counterproductive if he went in the wrong direction. At this time it was better to stay still. Therefore, waiting here was the best way. He was never a talkative person, and he didn't like to explain to others. Not to mention explaining to Kiran, who had the intelligence of an 8 or 9-year-old child. Kiran was infuriated by the word wait. Its owner's life was in danger at all times, and it was even more urgent than the fire in the room. Yet he was actually waiting here calmly? How despicable! Kiran was enraged. He opened his mouth and spat out a large ice ball. He threw it at Han Shangyue. You cold-blooded bastard. No wonder my master is unwilling to marry you. You deserve to be a bachelor. After smashing the puck, it turned around and ran forward. When Han Shangyue was meditating, there was a protective barrier around his body. Even if he was hit, it wouldn't hurt. When the ice ball approached the top of his head, it was blown away by the boundary energy and turned into a pile of small ice balls that fell to the ground. Han Shangyue opened his eyes and looked at the shattered ice balls around him. His lips twitched. This Kiran really needs to be taught a lesson. How dare he throw an ice ball at him? Impulsive and willful, doing things without thinking of the consequences. This personality was a bit like its owners. He looked sideways at Kiran, who was running away. His gaze was faintly complicated. He meditated for a while. In the end, he opened his eyes because of his restlessness. After a while, he sighed and took out a light blue conch from his chest. He used his fingers to cast a spell. Chapter 533. After the faint white light flashed, the blue conch became transparent like crystal and gradually transformed into a ripple-like mirror in front of his eyes. The mirror gradually became clear. What was reflected in it was not Han Shangyue, but a luxurious and romantic building. The hibiscus tent was warm, and the curtains of the bed were lowered. A young master was lying on the bed. As if he had sensed something, the young man who was sleeping soundly suddenly opened his eyes and looked straight at the mirror. Dizwa. His lips twitched and he suddenly sat up. Dizwa. Why are you snooping in the middle of the night? Fortunately, there were no beauties in his room. Otherwise it would be embarrassing. Rongyue Tianlan, help me do something. Han Shangyue didn't talk nonsense with him and went straight to the point. The young master was Rongyue Tianlan. When he heard Han Shanyue's words, his eyes immediately brightened. Please instruct me, Izwa. This Dizwa didn't easily ask for help. He might not even ask for help once in a few thousand years. Now he actually asked for help. What a miracle! What could it be that Dizwa couldn't solve by himself? Rongyue Tianlan's gossipy cells immediately burned, and his eyes lit up. All his drowsiness disappeared. Use your Heaven's Eye technique to check the surroundings of the primal chaos river. See if there are any abnormal fluctuations of psychokinesis. Find this person. Han Shangyue flashed a portrait of Shui Ilan in the mirror. Rongyue Tianlan whistled. What a beautiful man. Poetic and picturesque. I didn't expect there to be such a masterpiece in the lower bound. Han Shanhua's eyes twitched, and he said coldly, "Stop talking nonsense. Find him quickly." "Yes, sir." Rongyue Tianlan jumped off the bed, and his pajamas automatically turned into a light blue robe. He looked like an elegant young man. He was still a little curious. "Dizwa, this is the first time I see you looking for someone so urgently. Who is this person?" "A devil cultivator." Han Shanhue only replied with 4 words. No wonder there is a touch of demonic charm and evil aura between his eyebrows. He is a devil cultivator. Dizwa painted him so well. It seems like this person left a deep impression on Dizwa. Rongyue Tianlan's elegant face was full of gossip. Han Shanhue. Rongyue Tianlan couldn't help but add, "Dizwa, so, you aren't innately cold but you are interested in men. You weren't distracted during the chess game because of him, right?" Han Shanhue suddenly smiled. He didn't smile easily, but this smile made Rongyue Tianlan shiver. "Rongyue Tianlan, if I'm interested in men, I won't let you go." Rongyue Tianlan immediately hugged his own body with a face of chastity. "Dizwa, I can shed my blood to be your little attendant, but I will never sell my body." Han Shanhue. "Rongyue Tianlan, if you speak any more nonsense then I will go to your carefree island and flatten your fruit trees." This sentence clearly hit Rongyue Tianlan's weak spot. He immediately closed his fan and begged for mercy. "Dizwa, can this lowly one be wrong? Don't flatten my trees, they are my lifeblood. If the trees live, I live. If the trees die, I die. I will cast a spell to find him." As he spoke the last sentence, he had already begun to cast a spell. His hands formed a seal, and his body floated up, rushing out of the luxurious building and into the air. The water mirror in front of Han Shanhue, which had been following Rongyue Tianlan, also followed him outside. Chapter 534. In the mirror, Rongyue Tianlan was frequently making incantations in the air. One of his hands slowly opened in the air, and a phoenix eye gradually appeared in his palm. Green light shot out from the phoenix eye, directly into the misty distance. Shuailan, who was meditating in the ruined temple, suddenly sensed something and looked out of the window. But it was dark outside and he could only see a few stars shining in the sky. He looked at one of the stars and felt that the star was weird, as if it was a pair of God's eyes looking in his direction. He lowered his head and let his long hair cover his face. His robe had been destroyed by Ning Shuama, and he was only wearing a pair of pants. His skin was crystal clear and his proportions were perfect. In the dark night he shone with a charming light. He looked down at the unconscious Ning Shuama, who was lying on the futon. She was lying there motionlessly and was unusually obedient. After a while the feeling of being spied on disappeared. Shuailan slowly raised his head and looked at the sky outside the window. The star that looked like an eye had slowly slid away. It was obvious that it had given up on the ruined temple. Someone actually used the Heaven's Eye technique. Could that person be Han Shanhue? Shuailan secretly clenched his fist. He was in a hurry to meditate, so he didn't have time to put on a new robe. Now it seemed that he was lucky, and when he was meditating he restrained his psychokinesis. No one outside should be able to detect the waves of psychokinesis on him. Even if he used the Heaven's Eye technique, he might not be able to find them. But since that person used the Heaven's Eye technique, he might not be able to hide here. He had to think of another way. He stretched out his hand and a small embroidered bag appeared in his palm. The bag was obviously a Qiankuan bag for storage. It wasn't big, but there were many things inside. Ning Shuama only thought that his things were hidden in one of his pockets. She didn't know that he had a storage space. This space was in his mind. If he didn't cast a spell, this space wouldn't appear. The space wasn't big, but it was enough to store a Qiankuan bag that could contain everything. The Qiankuan bag was light blue in color, and had a plum blossom pattern embroidered on it. The embroidery was not exquisite. The shape of the plum blossoms was a little rough, and there were even a few wrong stitches. It was obvious that the person who embroidered this picture was a rookie. A voice drifted into her ears, "I'm so smart, but I can't embroider this well? It was too embarrassing. Just throw it away." It was a young girl's voice. It was clean and slightly hoarse, but it was extremely pleasant to the ears. The voice suddenly appeared in his mind. Shui Yilan's body stiffened slightly. He tried his best to capture the voice, but it gradually faded away and could no longer be heard. Chapter 535. Shui Yilan's memories were very fragmented and scattered, and he couldn't connect them together. However, it was enough to make his heart ache. His fingers once again caressed Ning Shuima's soft cheeks. His fingertips gently rubbed against her lips. "Little girl, you asked me to look for her, but I don't even know who she is." He sighed faintly. "But it doesn't matter. I will find her sooner or later, and ask her for the truth. I may marry her, but I will never let you go." He shook his head and stopped thinking about these things. He took out a bunch of strange things from his Qianquan bag: knives, scissors, tweezers, all kinds of bottles and jars, and even human skins of different skin colors. "Little Shuima, you will be shocked when you wake up." He chuckled. His smile was like a flower petal. "Dizwa, I didn't find the person you mentioned." After a quarter of an hour, Rongyue Tianlan floated down from the sky and shook his head apologetically. His face was pale. It was obvious that using the Heavenly Eye technique consumed a lot of psyche power. Even the Heavenly Eye technique couldn't find him. Han Shangyue frowned. Could it be that the person who always liked to dress in red had changed his appearance? He didn't use any techniques to walk on the road? This person was unprecedentedly cunning. I wonder if Ning Shuima suffered any losses in his hands. His heart, which had always been calm, was no longer calm. He slowly clenched his fingers. What method should he use to find him? "Dizwa, the future is long. No one can escape from your grasp. You can't find him now, but it doesn't mean you can't find him in the future. Just take your time." Rongyue Tianlan comforted him. Han Shangyue didn't speak. His eyes were empty, as if he was thinking. "This person is really important to you?" Rongyue Tianlan's gossipy nature started to bubble again. "He kidnapped my concubine." Han Shangyue didn't want him to continue guessing. Otherwise, he didn't know what Rongyue Tianlan would think. Rongyue Tianlan tripped and almost fell from the roof. He barely stood up. His peach blossom eyes were wide open, and his face was full of shock. "Double what? Dizwa, when did you take in a concubine? How come I didn't know? Heavens, didn't you always disdain these kinds of love and affection?" Han Shangyue said indifferently. "Do I need your permission to take a concubine? But what about Yunxi?" Rongyue Tianlan almost wanted to scratch his head. He even encouraged Yunxi to pursue happiness. "What does me taking a concubine have to do with her?" Han Shanyue's voice was even fainter as he raised his hand to turn off the La Conque mirror image. Rongyue Tianlan also knew that he had made a slip of the tongue, so he pulled himself together and said, "This red-clothed bastard actually dared to kidnap Dizwa's concubine. He must be tired of living. I will help Dizwa search again. Dizwa, do you have a portrait of your concubine?" Since he couldn't find Shui Yilan's whereabouts, perhaps he would start looking for clues from this concubine. Han Shangyue said, "There's no need to trouble you." He naturally had Ning Shuima's portrait on him, but it was a portrait of her dancing. He didn't want another person to see that kind of portrait. Moreover, if Shui Yilan was in disguise, he would have done the same for Ning Shuima. Even if Rongyue Tianlan forced himself to open his heavenly eye again, it wouldn't be of any use. He raised his hand to turn off the La Conque mirror. Rongyue Tianlan seemed to have thought of something and hurriedly said, "Dizwa, why don't you ask Yunxi for help? Her soul-searching bird is the best at finding people. No matter what that red-clothed man turns into, it can quickly find him." Chapter 536. Han Shangyue nodded slightly and muttered to himself, "Okay." He turned off the conch. He then took out a white voice transmission talisman and tapped it with his finger. The voice transmission talisman lit up. A moment later, Yunxi's surprised voice came through. "Dizwa." "It's me," Han Shangyue answered simply, his voice not as cold as before. "Yunxi, help me find someone." Yunxi agreed readily. "Okay. I'll get the soul seeker bird to find him. But, Dizwa, I need something that person often uses. Come to the middle of the chaotic river." Han Shangyue told her the exact location before cutting off the voice transmission talisman. He seemed to have sensed something and raised his head to look. He happened to see that the little Qilin had already rushed back. At this moment, it stopped not far away and angrily looked at him. "You're not looking for my master, but you're here flirting with girls." The little Qilin was very eager to learn. It had learned a lot of modern words from Ningxuema and Tom. Han Shangyue was speechless. He was too lazy to care about it and wanted to meditate again. Kirin knew that its words carried little weight. No matter what it said, Han Shangyue wouldn't take it to heart. It didn't want to waste its breath, so it told Han Shangyue about its discovery. "I found the scent of mermaids and blue phoenixes a few kilometers away. Do you think the disappearance of that bastard with my master has something to do with these two scents?" Mermaids and blue phoenixes were very rare in this world. The former was a spirit of the sea, and was almost impossible to find on the continent. As for the latter, it was the king of birds, and it would be difficult to find more than a few of them on this continent. It was very unusual that these two had appeared at the chaotic river at the same time. Did it have something to do with the disappearance of its master? Kirin didn't want to let go of any clues, so when it discovered the two scents, it hurried back to tell Han Shangyue and waited for him to analyze it. Although this person was perverted, he was strong enough, smart enough, and calm enough. He might be able to find clues to its master. Han Shangyue pondered for a moment and jumped onto Kirin's back. "Bring me there." A moment later, Han Shangyue and Kirin arrived at the beach where Yin Ziyuan had escaped from danger. Sure enough, there was the scent of a mermaid here, and the mermaid seemed to be seriously injured. The unique sweet smell of blood on the mermaid lingered on the riverside for a long time. He naturally sensed the aura of the blue phoenix bird, and Yi Qing wan and frowned slightly. He didn't expect her to come here and take away the mermaid. Kirin looked at him eagerly. "What do you think? Is it related to master?" "It has nothing to do with me." Han Shangyue only replied with 2 words, but his eyes were looking into the distance. Han Shanyue's vision was extraordinary. Chapter 537. Yin Ziyuan was running in a hurry. When she heard the call behind her, she subconsciously turned around and staggered. Not far behind her stood a valiant and spirited Kirin, looking quite awe-inspiring. When Kirin was with Ningxuema, it had always been in the form of a blue cat, so she did not recognize it. When she suddenly saw this mythical beast, she was so shocked that she took a few steps back. "Ew, how do you know my name?" Kirin was not in the mood to explain so much to her. It briefly explained its relationship with Ningxuema, and Yin Ziyuan finally understood that it was the cat. She breathed a sigh of relief and finally remembered that the legendary loner Ningxuema did have a Kirin by her side. She had been running in fear for half the night. When she saw Kirin now, she felt very close and could rely on it. She could not help but cry. Shuema was taken away by the red-clothed Guqin player. "Kirin, quickly go find the Taoist master and ask him to save her. I'm afraid that she will lose her life if you are late." Kirin interrupted her. "I am here on his orders to pick you up. I will take you to see him." After a moment, Yin Ziyuan was already kneeling in front of Han Shangyue. According to his instructions, she told him in detail what had happened on the boat. Han Shangyue listened without saying a word and did not interrupt. Yin Ziyuan felt that the surroundings were getting colder and colder, and the air pressure was getting lower and lower. Kirin was also listening to her on the side, and from time to time, he would curse the red-clothed pervert. When he heard that Yifeng had taken Ningxuema as a hostage to force Shui Yilan to release her, Kirin was angry. "This Yifeng is such a bastard. My master was obviously threatened. She was not with that pervert, but he actually used my master as a hostage. That red-clothed pervert did not care about my master at all. Why would she be threatened?" Yin Ziyuan could not see Han Shanyue's face clearly, but she felt a pair of sharp eyes looking at her. When she heard Kirin's words, she was a bit sad. Yifeng was wrong to do this, but at that time he had no other choice. But the red-clothed Guqin player was indeed threatened, so we were able to escape with our lives. Kirin was stunned for a moment and said, "So the red-clothed evildoer was not completely heartless to my master." When he finished this sentence, he felt that Han Shanyue looked at him, and his body felt a chill. "Continue." Han Shanyue spat out these 3 words. Yin Ziyuan explained everything in detail. After she finished, she kowtowed to him. Great master, I beg you to save Xue Xue. Xuema. It is really dangerous for her to stay by the red-clothed Guqin player's side. Also, please save the mermaid. It is Yuan's savior. If it is taken away by Yi Qianbei, I don't know what will happen to it. She kowtowed incessantly. Han Shangyue stood up and faintly said, Ning Xuema is my person. There is no need for you to beg. I will save her myself. You can go. He turned around and was about to leave. Yan Ziyuan heard him say this and was a bit relieved. But there was still the mermaid in Yi Qinghuan's hands. She quickly chased after him. Master, that mermaid. Yi Feng's life is not over yet. Han Shangyue only left these 6 words, and then rode away on Kiran. Yan Ziyuan was stunned. It was as if thunder had struck her. Yi Feng. Yi Feng. The mermaid who risked his life to save her was actually Yi Feng. Yi Feng was actually a mermaid? How could it be? Her head was buzzing. She sat on the ground with a thump. Her mind was filled with Yi Feng. Chapter 538. Yan Ziyuan's secret guard had always been by her side. He had shielded her from the wind and rain, saved her life several times, and was willing to do anything for her. But what about her response? She had treated him coldly several times. She had given him a hard slap. She thought that Yi Feng had finally abandoned her at the most critical moment. It turned out that he hadn't. He had only been injured and turned back into a mermaid. Then he had risked his life to save her. Yi Feng. Yi Feng. Yan Ziyuan jumped up. No, she had to save him. He had always been the one saving her. This time it was her turn to save him. She also knew that this Mr. Han Shangyue was a famous fortune-teller. His predictions were almost iron-mouthed. No one would doubt his predictions. Furthermore, they would all be verified without a single mistake. Han Shangyue had said that Yi Feng wouldn't die, which made her feel more at ease. However, how could she truly feel at ease if she didn't see him escape with her own eyes? She turned around and dashed away. She knew where Yi Qinghuan's residence was. She wanted to take a look and explore. When Yunqi appeared in front of Kiran's line of sight riding on a winged snow lion, Kiran's eyes widened. A fairy. It couldn't believe that it had met such an elegant and fairy-like fairy in such a dark and murky place. Snow as skin and jade as bones. This was exactly her. She was elegant and refined. Her actions carried a natural immortal aura. The muddy primal chaos river seemed to have become much brighter because of her arrival. Looking at her, Kiran couldn't help but think of its master. Its master was also a beauty, but compared to this woman, she seemed a little lacking. At least, its master had the aura of the mortal world. But this woman was so beautiful that she didn't have a trace of the mortal world. Mr. Yunqi floated down from the snow lion's back and bowed to Han Shangyue. He was actually here to look for this big block of ice. Kiran's ears immediately perked up, and its eyes widened. It looked at Yunqi from head to toe, and then from her feet to her head. This woman was so perfect from head to toe. Even her bearing was impeccable. What was her relationship with Han Shangyue? Mr. D? Wasn't his surname Han? Or was he using a fake name in front of its master? He really doesn't have any sincerity towards master. It would rather tell this woman its real name than tell its master. At this moment, Kiran's heart was filled with countless complaints. Its eyes returned to Han Shangyue. This big block of ice was actually smiling. Although the smile was very faint, it still made Kiran feel uncomfortable. This big block of ice had never smiled like this in front of its master before. Even his tone wasn't as cold as before. Yunqi, where's your soul-searching bird? Yunqi smiled sweetly. Here. She opened her jade-like fingers, and a snow-white bird the size of a parrot appeared in her palm. The bird was still nodding off, as if it had not yet awoken. Yunqi gently touched its blood-red, hook-like mouth with her finger and said gently, Little White, get up and get to work. After being teased by her, the bird finally opened its eyes unwillingly. When it suddenly saw Han Shangyue, its golden eyes lit up, and it jumped onto Yunqi's shoulder. Then it bowed respectfully to Han Shangyue, as if it was paying respects. Han Shangyue waved his sleeves and said, There's no need for these formalities. Let it find someone. A dress appeared in his palm. This is her dress, so it should have her scent. Chapter 539. Yunqi didn't dare delay. She immediately waved her hand to let the soul-searching bird sniff. Her pair of beautiful eyes also fell on that set of clothes. It was a woman's dress. Judging by the length of the dress, the owner seemed to be a little girl. Kiran's eyes widened. It had recognized that the dress was the one Ning Xuema had worn before she had soaked in the hot spring. She had only been 13 years old at that time. It was unexpected that Mr. Han had kept this dress. While the soul-searching bird was sniffing, Yunqi asked casually, "Sir, are you looking for the owner of this dress? Is it a little girl?" Han Shangyue nodded slightly but didn't say anything. "Is she your new disciple?" Yunqi was even more curious. Han Shangyue glanced at her lightly. "Yunqi, I asked you to look for someone. Do you have to interrogate me?" Yunqi froze for a moment and smiled sweetly. "I was just curious. Okay, I won't ask anymore." The little Qilin at the side couldn't hold it in any longer. It was most annoyed by people who spoke halfway and were unhappy with half of what they wanted to say, which made it feel somewhat suffocated. It immediately said, "My master isn't his disciple. She's his concubine." As soon as he said this, Yunqi's pretty face turned pale and she stumbled. Her eyes widened as she asked, "What?" She looked at Han Shangyue in shock and disbelief. Sir, you have a concubine?" Han Shangyue frowned slightly and said indifferently, "I did indeed have a marriage agreement with her. I took her as a concubine." Why? Yunqi's eyes widened. "Do I need to ask why?" Han Shangyue glanced at her and said flatly, "There's no reason. I took her because I wanted to." But, Yunqi stuttered. "But what?" "But sir, haven't you always, never been involved in relationships?" Yunqi still hadn't recovered from her shock. "Who told you that I took her in because of relationships?" Han Shanyue's voice was even fainter. "It wasn't because of relationships? Could it be that he had other difficulties?" Yunqi's heart, which had sunk to the bottom of the lake, finally rose a little. "Then why?" Han Shanyue's expression turned cold. "Yunqi, I have no obligation to answer your questions. If you don't want to, then forget it." Yunqi hurriedly said, "Sir, please don't take offense. She was just curious." Yunqi will not hesitate to go through water and tread on fire for Mister's orders. The soul-searching bird was indeed useful. After it sniffed Ning Xuema's clothes, it circled in the sky a few times. Suddenly, it raised its head and screeched. Then, it shot off in a certain direction like an arrow. The sky in the distance was already turning white. A dilapidated temple rustled in the autumn wind, dim and desolate. This place was 800 miles away from the primal Chaos River. It was located in the middle of a wilderness. In the distance, there were a few scattered tombs and an empty village. There must have been people here a long time ago, otherwise there wouldn't be this temple. However, with the passage of time, the village declined and the temple was abandoned. The temple was empty. There was not a single person in sight, but there were signs that someone had been here. The soul-searching bird dived into the temple and circled the praying mat on the ground, chirping non-stop. Yunqi immediately said, "Sir, it said that she used to rest here." Actually, Kiran didn't need her to say anything. It knew that its master had been here before, because there were remnants of Ning Xuema's aura and that perverted Shui Ilan's. Oh. Chapter 540. Han Shanyue's gaze was fixed on the praying mat. After a moment of silence, he suddenly reached out and picked up the praying mat, turning it over and over to examine it carefully. He even brought it close to his nose to sniff it. Yunqi's eyes almost fell out of their sockets. After knowing him for so many years, she knew better than anyone else how misophobic Han Shanyue was. Even if a golden praying mat was placed in front of him, he wouldn't even look at it, let alone this gray praying mat. Now he had picked it up and was even sniffing it. How worried was he about that girl that he was behaving in such an unusual manner? Was that little girl really a concubine that he had taken in through a scheme of power? Her fingers had already dug into her palms, but she didn't realize it. She forced herself to stay awake and pretended to be calm as she looked at Han Shanyue. She was as bright, beautiful, and noble as usual. Han Shanyue lightly hit the praying mat a few times. A few strands of red silk floated through the cracks of the praying mat and landed in his palm. His gaze fell on the strands of red silk, and his gaze was ice-cold. Kieran jumped to his side and sniffed the praying mat. Suddenly it cried out, "My master once lay on it. There is blood on it." It glanced at the red silk in Han Shanua's palm and sniffed it again. "My master's scent is also on it." She had been kidnapped by a devilish man and had once laid on the praying mat. There was blood and torn cloth. The combination of these three elements gave people a lot of room for imagination. Yunqi blurted out, "Could it be that she was already?" Before she could finish her sentence, Han Shanua glanced at her. His gaze was sharp and cold, causing Yunqi to feel a chill in her heart. She didn't finish her sentence. Instead, she sighed softly. "They have already left this place. Let's look elsewhere." Kieran was still naive and didn't understand. It looked at Yunqi with its round eyes and said seriously, "What are you trying to say? Are you trying to say that my master has already been killed by that man? Of course not. I established a blood contract with her. If she was really killed, I would be dead too." Yunqi glanced at Han Shanua and sighed softly. "This child is really cute." She raised her hand and wanted to rub Kieran's horn. Kieran dodged with a jump. Its horn could only be touched by its master. No one else was allowed to touch it. Yunqi's hand froze for a moment before she put it down. She obviously wouldn't stoop to Kieran's level, so she just nodded and looked at Kieran in surprise. She had already learned from Kieran's words that it was the missing girl's pet beast. She was a little puzzled that such a Kieran beast had been tamed by an ordinary girl. Now that he heard the words blood contract, he couldn't help but be stunned. He looked at Han Shanua with a complicated expression. "Sir, did you help her tame this Kieran?" He even established a blood contract for them? Han Shanua's sleeves fluttered as he walked out. "They left 4 hours ago. Let's continue the search." He took the lead and walked out of the temple without answering Yunqi's question. Yunqi froze on the spot for a moment as she watched Kieran run out. Her red lips pursed slightly as she followed after him. "Sir, this Kieran is really cute." Yunqi praised Kieran as she walked side by side with Han Shanua. "Oh," Han Shanua replied with one word. "Sir, Yunqi also wants a pet beast like this." Yunqi looked at the little Qilin with a hint of envy in her eyes. Chapter 541. "Don't you already have a winged snow lion?" Han Shanua finally replied to her with a long sentence. The snow lion had always been by Yunqi's side. It obviously understood human language and immediately rubbed its head against Yunqi's hand. Yunqi sighed faintly and raised her hand to stroke the snow lion's fur. "Yes, this snow lion was also given to me by Mr. I like it very much, but Little White is a terrestrial beast and I lack an aquatic beast. Mister, when you are free, can you catch a Qilin for me as a mount?" Before Han Shanua could say anything, Kieran had already jumped up. "Qilins are mythical beasts. They won't be anyone's pet. Do you think Qilins are water buffaloes? That you can catch one casually?" Her words were too insulting to the Qilin family. Yunqi was stunned. But aren't you that girl's pet?" Kieran said angrily, "I'm not a pet. We're friends. She won't treat me as a pet. Then I also want a Qilin that I can establish a blood contract with. I can also treat it as a friend." Yunqi didn't give up and looked at Han Shanua. "Sir, don't you think so?" Han Shanua turned to look at her. "Is this your condition for helping me find someone?" Yunqi was stunned. "Course not. Sir, Yunqi is just... If this is your condition for helping me find someone, I can agree to it. After 100 years, I will give you a Qilin beast. But our friendship ends here." Han Shanua's voice was cold and indifferent. Yunqi's expression changed and she hurriedly said, "Sir, you're thinking too much. Yunqi isn't using this as a bargaining chip. Sir and Yunqi are close friends, so it's natural for me to help you find someone." Yunqi just thought that Kieran was fun and said it casually. "Sir, please don't take offense." Han Shanua glanced at her. "This is your only chance to get a Qilin beast. You really don't want it?" "No, I don't want it. Our friendship isn't something a Qilin beast can compare to. Sir, just take it as a joke." Yunqi didn't dare to say anything about Kieran again. She lowered her head as a hint of sadness flashed in her eyes. "Yunqi, after this matter is over, I can give you another rare beast as a reward for your hard work. Yunshi sighed and said, seriously, mister. I've always treated you as my best friend. Even if you asked me to climb a mountain of swords or plunge into a sea of flames, I wouldn't even frown, let alone find someone for you. What does Sir think of Yunshi? Her eyes dimmed. Could it be that Sir has never treated Yunshi as a friend? If Sir continues to say such things, Yunshi will really be heartbroken. Han Shangyue nodded slightly and said, you don't have to worry too much. I originally wanted to make it up to you. Since you don't want it, then forget it. The group followed behind the soul-searching bird. The 2 humans and 2 beasts naturally traveled at an unprecedented speed. A distance of 100 miles was only the time it took to brew a cup of tea for them. Signs of human habitation finally appeared in front of them. It was a small city. Although it was not big, it was very prosperous. It was already early in the morning. Although the sun had only risen halfway, most of the people in the small city had already woken up, gone to work, and opened the market. From time to time, people would walk by in 2s and 3s on the narrow streets. There were also early cars that sped by on the streets. Small merchants and peddlers were hawking their wares along the streets. It was a scene of prosperity and prosperity. Chapter 542. This city wasn't big, and the people were simple and honest. Because it was located in a remote area, there weren't many officials and nobles who came here, so there weren't many opportunities to see outsiders. Han Shangyue and Yunshi were outstanding in both appearance and dress, so when they walked side by side on the street, many people stopped to look at them. The man was like a jade tree in the wind, and the woman was like a flower in a courtyard. They were already a very eye-catching combination, and with the majestic mythological beasts following them, they were even more eye-catching. The number of people who turned to look at them was 100%. Kiran's ears were sharp, so she heard a few words of praise from the people on the street. Phrases such as a match made in heaven, a perfect pair, and so on were more common. Kiran looked at the 2 people walking side by side in front of her and couldn't help but feel upset. He was her master's husband. How could he be a match made in heaven with another woman? If her master saw this, she would be furious. Han Shangyue was used to doing things his own way, so he didn't care about how others looked at him. In any case, no one could see his face. As for the gossip, he just treated it as a breeze and pretended not to hear it. Kiran was about to rush between them and separate the 2 people who were an eyesore. However, they did not expect that from the other end of the long street, an incomparably ostentatious carriage would rush towards them at full speed. Yunshi also heard the discussions around her, and her heart beat wildly. She looked at Han Shangyue, who was walking beside her, and her mind was slightly intoxicated. In this moment of distraction, she didn't notice the carriage rushing in front of her. Be careful. Her sleeve was pulled by someone, and she narrowly avoided the carriage. When the carriage passed by, it brought a strong gust of wind that lifted her long hair. She was shocked and cried out softly as she threw herself into the arms of the person next to her. The person next to her stiffened slightly and pulled her back a little. Then he pushed her away. Yunshi. Han Shangyue frowned slightly. This was the first time he had seen Yunshi act so carelessly. Although the carriage was fast, with Yunshi's skills, she should have been able to dodge it easily. She shouldn't have stood there foolishly like other weak women, waiting to be hit. Yunshi's pretty face turned slightly pale. She brushed her hair and smiled bitterly. I can't stand the smell of those coarse rouge and powder. Every time I smell it, I feel dizzy. The same goes for the soul-searching bird. As if to prove her words, the soul-searching bird flapping its wings in front of her seemed to have drunk too much. It flew in a figure 8 in the air and plummeted down. Yunshi raised her sleeve and caught the bird in her hand. Just now when the carriage passed by, there was a lot of chatter and the smell of cosmetics was really strong. At that time, Han Shangyue subconsciously held his breath. The carriage had already passed by, but the smell of cosmetics was still lingering in the air, giving people a headache. How is it? Han Shangyue frowned as his gaze landed on the soul-seeking bird that was shaking its legs and pretending to be dead. Let it rest for a while. It's best to purify the surrounding air. This bird is more sensitive to the smell of cosmetics. Yunshi fanned the soul-searching bird with her little hand. In order to get the bird to get up early to work, Han Shangyue waved his sleeve gently. A whirlwind instantly appeared on the street. It spun around the entire street and gradually dissipated in the distance. After the whirlwind passed, the smell of cosmetics was indeed gone. It was as fresh as if it had just rained. Chapter 543. Yunqi naturally knew that this was all thanks to Han Shangyue, so she smiled sweetly. Thank you, mister. Han Shangyue nodded slightly. Can it look for someone now? It should be able to. Yunqi released the bird again. The bird swayed for a bit before finally moving forward again. This kind of bird followed the aura of the person it was looking for. In other words, it had to go to every place that Ning Shuama had gone to. When the soul-searching bird stopped in front of a building and started chirping non-stop, it refused to fly forward no matter what. Yunqi was stunned. She looked at the small building in front of her, which was covered in colorful gauze and hung with countless red lanterns. She smiled bitterly. The soul-searching bird said that she went inside. Han Shangyue raised his head and looked at the small building. The corners of his mouth twitched slightly. It was obviously a brothel. The women in the brothel were usually open at night, so it was very cold and cheerless in the early morning. There weren't any gorgeously dressed ladies upstairs. There was only a servant downstairs, who was sitting at the door and dozing off. Yunqi frowned slightly. What a strong smell of mortal powder. Mister, the soul-searching bird won't enter this place. Before she could finish her sentence, a breeze blew past her. Han Shangyue had disappeared without a trace. He had obviously gone into the brothel to look for someone. How could Kirin remain calm when it heard that its owner was inside? Even if it was a brothel, it would break into a brothel. It leaped up and flew toward the small building as well. Yunqi stood there, her face pale. Dizwa was such a clean freak. Yet he had entered such a filthy place for that woman. What was that woman's position in his heart? Concubine. In this world, a concubine was something that could be casually discarded. If the men here were happy, they could casually give away their concubines. Why would they care? They wouldn't change their habits that they had maintained for thousands of years for a concubine. What kind of person was that woman? How could she make Dizwa treat her like this? Yunqi clenched her fists tightly. Suddenly, she steeled her heart and floated into the air, heading towards the small building. It was easy to imagine what kind of scenery there would be in the brothel in the morning. Han Shanyue's search was very fast. Wherever he went, he woke up many pairs of lovebirds, causing a commotion. When Yunqi finally caught up with him, he had just startled a pair of wild lovebirds that were having sex early in the morning. This pair of lovebirds was enjoying themselves when Han Shanyue suddenly barged in. The man was so scared that he almost couldn't get up. He jumped up from the bed and roared, "Which bastard is it?" Before he could finish cursing, his vision went black and he fell on the bed with a plop. He was on top of the woman, who was still in a daze. The woman immediately screamed. Before they could say anything, a large blanket came down on them, covering their naked bodies from head to toe. When Yunqi went in, she didn't even get a clear look at the two white shadows before her eyes were covered by a brocade handkerchief. "Go outside and wait, Yunqi." Han Shanyue's voice rang out not far from her. Yunqi only felt a strong force pushing her away. By the time she reacted, she was already outside the door. She lifted her hand and took off the brocade handkerchief. When she looked at it, she couldn't help but take a whiff. This was Dizwa's brocade handkerchief. It was filled with his refreshing scent. Chapter 544. Dizwa was quite considerate towards her. Yunqi's face was filled with joy. He had been afraid of seeing those dirty scenes, so he had covered her eyes with a brocade handkerchief. Her heart was beating wildly as she carefully put away the brocade handkerchief. Before Yunqi could finish her thoughts, Kirin had also come out. Han Shanyue wasn't so polite to it. "Get out of here." Kirin had obviously been thrown out. It staggered in the corridor, but it quickly steadied itself. It was still unconvinced. "Why can you see it but I can't? Isn't it just a fight between demons? It's not like I haven't seen it before." It had asked its master about this question, and its master had told it that naked men and women rolling around together was called a fight between demons. Yunqi was speechless. Her face and ears were red. She finally understood what the two white things were that she didn't have time to see clearly just now. She was too embarrassed to stay there any longer, so she turned and flew down the small building to wait outside. After the commotion, the other people in the small building woke up with a start. It was a mess. Some people were shouting, some were yelling, and some were shouting to capture the assassin. There were many hired thugs and tortoise slaves in the brothel. They all rushed up, wanting to capture the person who had dared to barge in. Yunqi was waiting downstairs from afar. She had heard the commotion upstairs, but she wasn't worried about Han Shangyue. It was undoubtedly a fool's dream for the people here to capture him. They would be lucky if they didn't get slapped to death. A moment later, the chaotic brothel suddenly quieted down. The shouting people seemed to have been suppressed by someone's aura. They didn't even dare to breathe loudly. Yunqi also held her breath. Had he found the person he was looking for? That girl had been brought to this place. Her chastity had probably been lost. If that girl had lost her chastity, how could she still be worthy of Dizwa? Actually, even if she hadn't lost her chastity, she still wouldn't be worthy. Now that she had lost her chastity, she was even less worthy. She even felt that being Dizwa's maid was dirty. Just as she was thinking about this, Han Shanyue's figure appeared upstairs. He lowered his sleeves and said, "Yunqi, let the soul-searching bird come up." Could it be that he didn't find it? Yunqi's heart was in a mess. She didn't know if she was hoping to find him or not. She didn't dare delay, so her figure flashed and she floated up. Her clothes fluttered as she landed upstairs. Han Shanyue must have used a spell to clear the air in this building. The unique smell of cosmetics in the brothel had already disappeared without a trace. The soul-searching bird circled around the building for a while before flying straight into one of the rooms. Han Shanyue's expression changed slightly as he followed him in. This room was obviously a courtesan's boudoir. The decorations inside were gorgeous and gaudy. The most conspicuous thing was a large carved bed in the room. The bedding on the bed was messy. It was obvious that someone had slept here not long ago. The soul-seeking bird carefully hopped onto the big bed and chirped non-stop. Yunqi paused and looked at Han Shanyue's unfriendly expression. "It said that she slept on this bed, master." Kiran pounced on the bed and sniffed with all its might. However, it couldn't smell anything. It looked up at Han Shanyue and asked, "Master, why can't I smell her?" Shuilan cleaned up the traces of this place. Han Shanyue's voice was cold. "That bastard. He actually brought Shuema here. He even let her sleep on such a dirty bed." Chapter 545. That bastard. He had actually brought Shuema here. He had even let her sleep on such a dirty bed. Han Shanyue turned around and asked the trembling brothel keeper, "Where did the girl who slept here go last night?" His aura was too strong, and his voice was too cold. The brothel keeper was so scared that her eyes were wide open, and she couldn't speak. Yunqi had no choice but to soften her voice and help her ask. She had a gentle personality, and she finally managed to calm the brothel keeper down. However, although the brothel keeper's mind was normal, she was obviously confused. "This is Huan Chui's room. She has been sleeping here all this time." She turned around and called for Huan Chui. A young girl dressed in green walked out from the group of women and answered in a trembling voice, "This is indeed my room. I was in this room all last night." She paused for a moment, then continued, "I even received a guest. Ning Shuoma had been lying here, and this woman had been receiving a guest? She had been doing such dirty things beside her?" Han Shanyue slowly clenched his fingers and waved his sleeve. The woman named Huan Chui screamed and fell down the stairs. Fortunately, the building wasn't very high, so she wasn't seriously injured from the fall. She was only temporarily crippled, so she scrambled to another room and didn't dare to come out again. Kiran jumped up. "That's not right." Han Shanyue looked at it. "What's not right?" Kiran said. "That woman didn't fight in this room just now. There's no such smell here." There was actually a special smell of adrenaline when a man and a woman made love. Kiran smelled it a few more times, so it had experience. Han Shanyue was speechless. He instantly understood. The woman named Huan Chui didn't dare to lie at this time. She had probably been bewitched and received a guest in another room. After all, the rooms here were all similar. Shuilan seemed to have thought of everything. He was as cunning as an old fox. He had made Shuama sleep here for half the night. Where had he gone after that? He looked at Yunxi. To be exact, he was looking at the bird in her palm. Let it continue searching. Upon hearing this, the bird flew up and circled around the building. This time it didn't choose a direction to fly in. Instead, it landed and chirped at Yunxi. Yunxi frowned and said, "Sir, the soul-searching bird said that it can't sense anything now." Can't sense it? How could he not sense it? Was Ning Shuama still in this building? It was impossible that he couldn't find it. The most likely reason for this was that the person had smeared Ning Shuama's body with a scent that the soul-searching bird hated, so that it could no longer search for her. The smell of disgust, that carriage with the thick smell of cosmetics. He turned his head and immediately asked the brothel keeper, "Are there any girls here who are sent out? How many of you left just now?" The brothel keeper was at a loss. "We don't go out in the morning, and no girls go out." After hearing what she said, the horse carriage became even more suspicious. Could it be that Ning Shuama was in that carriage? Had he just brushed past her? Han Shangyue turned around and wanted to leave. The brothel keeper muttered to herself. Suddenly, she seemed to remember something and slapped her head. "I remember now. I have a younger sister who came home this morning. She asked me to lend her a few top girls. They just left." Han Shangyue paused. That carriage belonged to the brothel keeper? Then there was nothing suspicious. Chapter 546. Han Shangyue paused for a moment before flying down the stairs. Yunxi and Kiran hurriedly followed, and the two of them disappeared in the blink of an eye. The brothel keeper was dumbfounded. This was like seeing a ghost in broad daylight. She had actually seen two top-notch men in one night or two? Who was the other one? The brothel keeper vaguely felt that she had seen a handsome guy, but she couldn't remember who he was. A courtesan walked over and asked her in surprise, "Mother, when did you have a younger sister?" "How did I remember that Mother was an orphan? I wanted to ask Mother this morning, but I didn't dare to ask. That woman even took away a few of our ladies." The brothel keeper was speechless. Her head buzzed and she seemed to have finally reacted. Yes, she didn't have a younger sister. Her family was all dead, and she was the only one left. Then who was the woman she had affectionately sent away early in the morning? Wait a minute. That woman had taken away 5 or 6 of her ladies. The brothel keeper felt as if she had been struck by lightning. She jumped up and said, "Hurry up and check for me. Which ladies were taken away?" She was usually so stingy that she would calculate and spend even 1 tael of silver. Now that so many ladies had been taken away, she felt as if she was about to die. After a moment of chaos, someone came back and reported, "Mother, it was Peony Jasmine. And 6 others. All of them were her top ladies." The brothel keeper broke down. "Hurry up and chase after them." The slaves didn't move. "Mother, you swore that you would give those ladies to your so-called younger sister. If you go back on your word and chase after them, you will be struck by lightning from the heavens." The brothel keeper was speechless. When Ning Shuama really woke up, she was in a carriage. Then she was a little stunned. There were 6 seductively dressed women around Ning Shuama. The smell of their cosmetics rushed into her nose, causing her to sneeze loudly as soon as she opened her eyes. "You're awake. Mother, you're awake. Oh, Mother, you're awake. Mother, are you tired from lying down? Let me massage your legs for you." Those women were frighteningly passionate and attentive. "Mother. Mother." Ning Shuama turned over and tried to sit up. Where was she now? Was this a dream? Or did she transmigrate in her sleep again? As soon as she moved, the 6 beauties held her down one after another. "Mother, your body is still very weak. It's better for you to rest." "That's right, Mom. You don't look well." Peony's heart aches just looking at her. The 6 beauties took turns kissing each other. Ning Shuama only felt her head buzzing and her head swelling up by a size. She didn't have much strength in her body, so she couldn't move after being pressed down by these 6 women. This scene was too strange. It was almost the same as when she had just transmigrated to Ning Shuama's mansion, and was locked in an iron cage. "Bring me a mirror," she said. Even she herself was shocked by the sound she made. Her voice had also changed. The originally delicate and crisp lowly voice had become old and hoarse. She was simply like an old woman in her 60s or 70s. The women couldn't help but look at each other when they saw her distorted expression. The women might forget to bring other things when they went out, but mirrors were indispensable. Immediately, someone took out a smooth bronze mirror and handed it to her. Chapter 547. Ningxuomo raised her hand to take the mirror. She looked into the mirror and felt as if she had been hit by a stick. Even her breathing almost stopped. What appeared in the mirror was an old lady with wrinkles on her face. Her hair was white and she looked like a nouveau riche with a few gold hairpins. Her small eyes were slightly squinted. Her mouth was already shriveled, but her lips were painted red. Oh my God! Who was the old witch in the mirror? Was it her? Ningxuoma's gaze fell on her hand that was holding the mirror. Her hand that used to be delicate had become like the bark of an old pine tree. There were also spots of age spots on the back of her hand. Thud! The mirror fell from her hand. She had always thought of herself as a calm empress. No matter what strange things happened to her, she would be able to stay calm and find the best solution. This was also the reason why she had always been proud of herself. But now she could no longer stay calm. Her head was buzzing. Countless images flashed before her eyes. Shuilan had cast a voodoo spell on her. Not long after she ran out, she was violently pulled back and crashed into Shuilan's arms. Then she felt pain and numbness all over her body. In her daze, she heard Shuilan talking to her. Then she completely fainted. When she woke up, she had turned into this old witch. What kind of mother was she? Was someone forcing her to age? Or did she die as Ningxuoma in her previous life and transmigrated into this old pimp's body? No matter which one it was enough for her to break down. When she transmigrated into a 12 or 13-year-old girl, God did not treat her too badly. After all, she was a beautiful girl. Even if she was a good-for-nothing, she could accept it and work hard with that identity. But now she had turned into an old lady. How could Ningxuoma, who always cared about her appearance, accept this? She tried her best to calm herself down. Then she seemed to have thought of something. She raised her arm and rolled up her sleeves, revealing a large part of her arm. She wore a few gold bracelets on her wrist. When she raised her arm, they made a series of clanging sounds. The skin on her arm that was hidden in her sleeves was also loose. It was no different from an old lady's arm. She was still unwilling to give up and decided to touch herself. But no matter where he touched, the skin on her body was loose. Every time he touched it, there would be a handful of wrinkles. Ningxuoma was about to cry. Heavens! Let another bolt of divine lightning strike her. She did not want to transmigrate into an old lady. Don't be a brothel keeper. This was challenging her bottom line. When the women saw her grief-stricken appearance, they all tried to comfort her. It was nothing more than that her mother's body would recover, and there was no need to worry. It would have been better if they hadn't comforted her. Chapter 548. Ningxuoma looked in the direction of the voice and found that there was an old man sitting in the corner of the carriage. He had the same wrinkled skin and white hair. He was also dressed like a nouveau riche. His face even looked a little wretched. He looked like a pimp in the movies. At this moment, his pair of muddy eyes were looking at her helplessly. Needless to say, this man was the husband of this old body of hers. Ningxuoma couldn't bear the blow and closed her eyes. She really wanted to die at this moment. She raised her hand and pulled out a hairpin from her head and directly stabbed it into her heart. Since she could transmigrate after she died, she wanted to transmigrate again. Even if she was beaten to death, she wouldn't be a wrinkled old woman. Amidst the women's cries of alarm, her wrist was tightly gripped by someone. Old woman, we're about to have a good life. Why do you want to die? That old man's movements were actually very fast. He actually managed to grab her wrist in the nick of time. The hand on her wrist was slightly warm. There were also age spots in old pine bark. However, when he grabbed her wrist, it didn't feel rough. Moreover, the strength was very precise. It didn't hurt her and she couldn't break free. Okay, old woman, I know you feel bad because your legs are useless. Don't worry, I will always take care of you and won't let you suffer any grievances. The pimp patted her hand as if he was coaxing a child. His actions made the other girls envious as well. In their line of work, their lives were like floating duckweed. Although there were many men around them, how many of them could be entrusted with their lives? Most of the women in the brothel had a miserable fate in the end. Not to mention marrying a high official, it was already a blessing if they could marry an ordinary man who cared about them. Now the old woman in front of her was ugly and paralyzed. This old man actually treated her so well. She really met the right person. This body was actually a paralyzed person. Ning Xuema felt like she was hit by a stick again. She stared at the old man. No one knew what she was thinking. The old man sighed and raised his hand to stroke her hair. Old woman, don't think too much. Do you want to drink some water to moisten your throat? He was probably afraid that she would try to kill herself again, so he simply removed the sharp hairpins on her head. Then, he carried her in his arms and let her drink the honey water that he had just made. It was probably due to the smell of the girl's cosmetics in the carriage that Ning Xuema could smell the same scent on the old man's body. When she was helped up and laid in his arms, goosebumps rose all over her body. She subconsciously pushed the bowl away. I won't drink it. It had been 3 to 4 minutes since she woke up, and her mind, which had been struck by lightning, finally began to calm down. He vaguely sensed that something was not right here. She could faintly feel that her carriage was moving very fast. Although she was covered with thick bedding, she still felt a little bumpy. The bumpy ride made her bones hurt. She sensed that there was no psychokinesis in her body. Even the inner force that she was so proud of had disappeared without a trace. She could not feel her legs. She wanted to move her legs, but the nerves in her body did not direct her in that direction. Sure enough, she was paralyzed. She threw a tantrum and did not give the old man a good face. The old man was not angry. He just smiled and rubbed her hair to comfort her. Chapter 549. He bent down and whispered in her ear, "Old woman, your hair is messy. Let me comb it for you." His warm breath by her ear made the hair on the back of Ning Xuema's neck stand up. She raised her hand and tried to push him away. "Get out of my way." The old man held her hand again. "Old woman, your temper is getting worse and worse. It's not good for your health." He tried his best to persuade her. It seemed that he was thinking about her. Ning Xuema felt like she was going to explode under the envious gazes of the other women. She took a deep breath and then another. "Open the window. It's suffocating." The smell of cosmetics in the carriage was so strong that her brain almost stopped working. The old man sighed. "Old woman, you have typhoid fever. It's not suitable for you to be exposed to the cold wind. You can't open the window." Just as he said that, the carriage suddenly jolted. The half-closed window opened a little and the fresh wind blew in. Ning Xuema was slightly refreshed. Suddenly, a light voice came from outside the carriage. "Be careful." This voice was so familiar. Ning Xuema's body suddenly stiffened and she subconsciously looked out of the window. Through the half-closed window, she saw Han Shangyue jumping to the side with a woman in his arms. The carriage moved very quickly, and this scene flashed before her eyes. She didn't even have time to see the face of the woman in his arms. She only vaguely felt that the woman was very beautiful. She even saw the majestic snow-white lion with 2 pairs of wings beside the woman. Then she heard him call out, "Yunshi." Then she heard the gentle voice of the woman. Yunshi can't stand the smell of coarse cosmetics. Every time she smells it, she feels dizzy. So does the soul-searching bird. She subconsciously looked back and saw Han Shangyue standing beside the woman. He seemed to be looking at the bird in her hand and was even fanning the bird with his sleeve. At that moment, the sunlight shone on the golden boy and jade girl, as if inlaid with a circle of faint silver light. It was warm and peaceful. Inside the carriage, the girls chattered and laughed. Ning Xuema could no longer hear the conversation between Han Shangyue and the girl. She suddenly didn't want to listen anymore. Why was he here? Who was the woman beside him? What was their relationship? Most importantly, she saw an old acquaintance. Did this mean that she was still in this era? What year is it now? Ning Xuema suddenly asked a girl beside her. The girl was startled and replied, "It's the autumn equinox of Luxian's 38th year." After answering, she asked in astonishment, "Mama, You even forgot the year? Ning Xuema's heart seems to have a flash of lightning. It's still the same era, and this day is only one day away from when she fell into Shui Yilan's hands and was plotted against by him. Old woman, what's wrong? The old man hugged her tightly. Ning Xuema stared at him coldly. Who are you? The old man's eyes flashed with surprise. Old woman, what's wrong? I'm your husband. Then what's your name? What's my name? Where is our customs clearance document? Ning Xuema asked several questions in one breath. The old man sighed. You're confused because you're sick. You even forgot your name. I'm called Xue Finghua. As for you, you're called Wei Chunhua. Here, this is our customs clearance document. Chapter 550. Two customs clearance documents were placed next to Ning Xuema's hand. Ning Xuema clenched her teeth and took the documents. She glanced at them. The names on the documents were exactly the same as what the old man had said. Wei Chunhua. Unexpectedly, she had the same name as Wei Xiaobao's mother. Ning Xuema stared at the old man. After staring for a moment, her eyes revealed a hint of doubt. So it's like this? She lowered her eyelids and sighed. I actually can't remember anything. The old man smiled and hugged her. Chunhua, don't worry. Even if you forget everything, it doesn't matter. It's fine as long as I remember everything. I will always be by your side. His deep affection made Ning Xuema feel nauseous. Ning Xuema forced a smile. She looked at the peach blossoms and lioli around her. Who are these lively little girls? They were given to you by your older sister. Our hopes for the rest of our lives are all on them. After we go back, we will open a lovely spring courtyard. With these beautiful girls, our customers will definitely come rolling in. The old man outlined a beautiful blueprint for her future life. Ning Xuema sighed. At this time, she seemed to have finally accepted her fate. These girls are indeed lively. Each and every one of them are like spring onions. She closed her eyes again. After resting for a moment, she opened her eyes again. What's wrong with my legs? How come I can't even feel them now? The old man said, you probably caught a cold. Since the day before yesterday, you suddenly couldn't move. That's right, that's right. Mama, at that time, Master carried you to our courtyard. I really didn't expect that you were our Wei Mama's younger sister. A girl named Peony at the side spoke quickly. She giggled as she talked about the situation at that time. Ning Xuema seemed to be curious. Wei Mama? Which courtyard did you originally belong to? We are the girls from your biological sister Wei Chua's courtyard. That courtyard is called Yizhanghong. It is quite famous in this small town. Peony opened her chatterbox. Actually, our Mama Wei has always declared to the outside world that she is an orphan, so when Master came to visit while carrying you, it really gave us a fright. What's more, I didn't expect that Mama Wei would give us to you without saying anything. You should know that our Mama is a famous miser. She seemed to realize that she had said something wrong, so she pursed her lips and stopped talking. Ning Xuema was at a loss again. So I have an older sister. My head is buzzing right now, and I can't remember anything. I don't even remember entering your courtyard. Mother, you were unconscious at the time, so of course you don't remember, Peony explained. Master carried you here and has been waiting on you in the room since. When we left this morning, it was also Old Master who carried you into the carriage. Old Master is so considerate to Mother, it really makes people envious. Ning Xuemo raised her head and rubbed her eyebrows. I see. She glanced at the old man who had been hugging her and said with concern, Old man, so you did so many things while I was unconscious. Are you tired? It's fine if you put me down. Go over there and rest, okay? That old man didn't seem to think that she would accept her fate so quickly. He carefully looked at her eyebrows and eyes. Chunhua, are you all right? Ning Xuema slightly shook her head. I have to live according to the person I was reincarnated as. Since I'm now Wei Chunhua, I naturally have to live well. Reincarnated? Chunhua, do you think you've reincarnated? If you reincarnated, shouldn't you be a child? Chapter 551. Ning Xuema closed her eyes and said, Sometimes, a person who has escaped death cannot be reincarnated as a child. Instead, they will possess the body of a person who has just died. The old man's eyes flashed. Are you talking about reincarnating in someone else's body? Ning Xuema sighed. You can say that. Do you think you reincarnated in someone else's body? The old man held her hand. Ning Xuema accepted her fate and closed her eyes. I don't know. I always feel that I was still a little girl just a moment ago, but when I woke up I became an old woman. It really feels like an impermanent dream. The old man smiled. No wonder she could calm down so quickly. It turned out that she thought so. He raised his hand and rubbed Ning Xuema's hair. All right, don't think so much. You are Wei Chunhua. Look at the nonsense you are saying. You are scaring these children. Ning Xuema's hair was a little numb from his rubbing. She raised her hand and patted him. You are already so old, don't be so mushy. I am not a little girl. She looked around. The girls were indeed a little frightened by their ghostly conversation. They quietly scattered and sat away, not daring to surround the two of them. Chunhua, you will always be a little girl in my heart, the old man said affectionately. His eyes, which were almost squeezed out by his wrinkles, seemed to be flashing with light. Ning Xuema closed her eyes. Yes, I know. You go and rest first. I also want to be alone. The old man patted her hand. All right, then you can sleep for a while. I will stay by your side. Sure enough, he sat cross-legged beside her and closed his eyes to rest. The girls looked at each other. These two people would be their support in the future, so naturally they could not offend them. The girls in this line of work were the best at observing people's expressions. They also quieted down and did not dare to say anything. Ning Xuema rested for a while. She seemed to be a little bored, so she opened her eyes and chatted with the girls. She asked them about their life in the garden, their hobbies, their specialties, and so on. Those women naturally answered all of her questions, and the carriage was once again filled with laughter and laughter. From their conversation, Ning Xuema knew that these girls were all top girls who were proficient in music, chess, calligraphy, and painting. Their music skills were especially good. Ning Xuema was very pleased. You are all talented women. Those high officials and nobles will definitely like you. Finally, there is hope for the rest of my life. She glanced at the old man beside her and sighed again. It must have been hard on him while I was unconscious. Let him have a good rest. Peony, help this old woman up and sit down. My bones are hurting from lying down like this. That Peony naturally came over to lend an arm to help her up. Ning Xuema sat leaning against the car window looking out. At this moment, the carriage had already left the city and was rushing through a wilderness. The road was not wide, and there were occasional potholes. On both sides of the road were large tracts of farmland. It was already autumn, and the crops in the farmland were tall, like a continuous array of green gauze curtains. The air outside is really good. Ning Xuema sighed. She simply opened the window and used her hand to lean against the window to admire the scenery outside. She could not exert any strength in the lower half of her body. Sitting like this was somewhat strenuous, so she could only rely on her arms to support herself. She seemed to have exerted a little more strength, and the golden bracelet on her wrist knocked against the window. Not only did it abrade her wrist, but it also accidentally fell off her wrist and rolled out of the window. Chapter 552. Aya, my bracelet! Ning Xuema cried out in distress. Stop the carriage, stop the carriage! Just as the coachman outside was about to stop the carriage, the old man in the carriage opened his eyes. If it's lost, it's lost. We still have to hurry on. I'll buy you a new one later. He instructed the coachman to continue moving. Ning Xuema was angry. Old man, you don't know how to live well. This golden bracelet is worth a lot of money. What's the trouble of picking it up? Stop the carriage, stop the carriage. The old man couldn't persuade her, so he ordered the carriage to stop the carriage and asked a girl to pick it up. Ning Xuema's face tensed up. Old man, I remember that the bracelet was a token of our love. I don't want someone else to pick it up. The old man was stunned and frowned. It's just a bracelet. It doesn't matter who picks it up. Their legs are more nimble. Ning Xuema glared at him. You said that you would treat me well for the rest of my life. You don't understand the hearts of women at all. She was like an 18 or 19-year-old girl. The girls in the carriage were shocked by her and had goosebumps. They thought in their hearts, she's really an old witch. She's so old yet she's still acting like a spoiled child. However, they all spoke up for her, saying that it was better for the lover to pick up the token of love. The old man was in a hurry and didn't want to be delayed by such a small matter. He looked at Ning Xuema and couldn't help but sigh. Okay. I'll go down and pick it up for you. Sure enough, he jumped off the carriage shakily and walked towards the bracelet. The carriage had already moved forward for a while, and the bracelet was dozens of meters away from the carriage. When he was about to reach the bracelet, he suddenly heard a scream behind him. He subconsciously turned around and saw that the carriage had turned around for some reason. It meant that the carriage was going back. Ning Xuema, who had been staying in the carriage, jumped out of the carriage. She didn't jump off the carriage but slapped the coachman off the carriage. Then, a golden light flashed in her palm and she stabbed the butt of the horse pulling the carriage. The horse pulling the carriage was in pain and screamed. It was shocked. Then, he spread his hooves and pulled the carriage towards him. The old man was startled, and his body subconsciously dodged to the side of the road. The carriage swept past him like a gust of wind, and madly rushed back the way it came. Damn it! He had been tricked by that girl. A sharp light flashed in the old man's eyes, but he stood still. He had planted a heart-linking venomous insect on her body. Once she ran 2 miles away, she would automatically fly back to him. At that time, he would teach her a lesson. The girls in the carriage panicked and screamed. Then, Ning Xuema's stern shout made them completely shut up. That's the red-clothed zither demon who specializes in killing women. If you don't want to die, shut up. All the girls were stunned. The news about the red-clothed zither demon had spread like wildfire recently, so they had naturally heard about it. Ning Xuema didn't allow them to be in a daze. She stretched out her hand and said, "Quick, prick your fingers and drip your blood on my palm. I have a way to get you out of here." At this time she had a kind of dignity that made people believe in her. Those girls looked at each other. In the end, they were still afraid of the red-clothed zither demon. Although they were skeptical, they still pricked their fingers with the golden hairpin and dripped their blood on Ning Xuema's broken palm. Their blood dripped on the wound, but it didn't flow out. Instead, it directly seeped into her wound. Oh! Chapter 553. Ning Xuema's arm was in severe pain. Beads of sweat seeped out of her forehead, but the corner of her mouth faintly revealed a smile. She could feel that something was cruising along the veins in her arm, approaching the wound on her palm. The frightened horse ran very fast and in the blink of an eye, it had already traveled more than 2 miles. That old man was naturally Shui Ilan. He was originally waiting for Ning Xuema to fly back on her own. However, he did not expect that when the carriage was about to become a small black dot, Ning Xuema still had no intention of flying back. Damn it. It seemed like this girl really knew how to use the heart-linking venom. She even knew how to use the blood of a prostitute to make the heart-linking venom temporarily lose its effect. This girl clearly knew his ability. She could not escape from his grasp with her own strength, so what was the purpose of her running for her life? Furthermore, she had turned back and was running towards the direction of the small town. Han Shanyue. She must be planning to go back and ask for help from Han Shanyue. It turned out that the moment she saw Han Shanyue, she already had the idea of running away. Once she met up with Han Shanyue, it would be as difficult as ascending to heaven to catch her. What a cunning little girl. She was so sure that Han Shanyue would save her. Shui Ilan was naturally unwilling to let the cooked duck fly away. He no longer cared about pretending to be an old man and quickly chased after her. After all, he was still injured. Although he had recovered part of his strength through meditation, he was still weak and his speed was not as fast as before. Even so, his running speed was still faster than the carriage. In just a moment, the distance between the two sides had closed. The girls who were hiding in the carriage saw him running towards them and were all scared pale. This old man was indeed not an ordinary old man. How could an ordinary old man run so fast? Shui Ilan's voice came from behind. "Little girl, you better stop the carriage as soon as possible. Otherwise, if I catch you, I'll skin you alive." Ning Xuema clenched her teeth and leaned against the shaft of the carriage. In her hand was the golden hairpin she had stolen from Peony's hair. She acted as if she didn't hear his threat. Not only did she not stop the carriage, She even stabbed the horse's butt. The horse was simply furious. It was already running so fast, but its butt was still stabbed. Did she still have any humanity? It spread its hooves even more, causing the carriage to jump like crazy, and its ponytail also swung wildly. Ning Shuama was close to the horse's butt, so she was inevitably hit by the horse's tail. Her cheeks burned with pain, but she clenched her teeth and endured it. This was her only chance to escape. If she missed this chance, she did not know what would happen to her. Han Shanhua, I hope you are still here. I hope you are still in the town. The horse's tail, the horse's tail, the horse's tail, the horse. Shuailan threatened Ning Shuama with a few words, but it did not work. Instead, it made this girl crazily jump the horse's butt. He finally knew that threatening her was useless, so he immediately changed his target. The girls in the carriage, listen up. Quickly make her stop the carriage. Otherwise, even if I don't do anything to her, I will peel off your skin and break your bones, torturing you to death. The 6 girls in the carriage had never experienced this kind of situation before. They were already dizzy from the running carriage, so when they heard this threat, their faces became even paler. You're tuning into the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.